Welcome to the Independent Characters, episode 212, Show of Force, Talons of the Emperor. It has been too long, my friends.
It's been a minute.
But we're still in sync, baby.
We're still in sync. Listen to those people, if you're still around listening to the show at this point, which you are. I know you are.
We're not dead yet.
We're not dead yet. And we have no plans of being dead. If I got to tell you, I'm always hypersensitive to when we are late for episodes. And I know people are like, no, it's okay. But here's the thing. I think consistency in this kind of thing is very important, whether it's a web comic, a podcast, whatever. Being consistent and saying, here's when we're coming out and we come out is super important. Life has a way of kind of kicking you in the jimmy and saying, this is not going to happen.
When all Beavis and Butthead on the intro.
And it has been a rough month to month and a half for, I think, all of us concerned here. We very much have wanted to get together and produce the show. Moves for certain members of our party.
This was a way more fun way than I spent the last two Saturday mornings, I assure you.
Health concerns for other members.
Walls being annihilated.
Yeah, cars crashing into buildings and construction underway in the Astronomicon has interrupted a bunch of stuff. Work life continues and some things just unfortunately take precedence. And we are still committed to the show. I am still committed to the show. I'm still committed to 40K. I love it. So there will be more episodes coming out. But this one has been too long in coming. And thank you very much for listening and being patient while we get this madness out of the way. Yep. Yeah, dude, we didn't even talk about fires and freaking.
You literally mentioned that. And I forgot. I was like, yeah, fires. Oh my God. That wasn't that long ago. Wow.
Yeah. It has just been.
Hits keep coming, baby.
2020.
Little rascal.
The year the hits keep coming. And I got to tell you, unfortunately, 2021 is just an arbitrary date, man. Nothing's saying this is going to stop on December 31st as much as I wish it would.
No, but it's nice to have a little hope.
It is. And I have a lot.
There we go.
I'm always very positive.
You have to be.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. I think we've clearly got Jody and Justin here.
Hey.
We are going to launch right into Elite Choice. So I'll go with mine first.
Do it.
All right. Mine is actually something that I am excited about because
I would hope so.
And it's not a paint job or something along those lines. Charlie Brassley has made a automated Crusade roster, which utilizes it's like Google spreadsheets and such. It is so awesome. You can find more information about this at thebeardbunker.com, but it works on your mobile device for helping you track your Crusade forces, which
what
is
a saint.
Awesome.
That's cool.
Because I've played a Crusade game, which you'll hear about later, and super into Crusade at the moment.
How many power level was that again?
50.
70?
For who?
We'll talk about that too.
So this basically, he's got like sheets for just everything, all the units.
It works all from your mobile device.
That's
super
cool,
great.
I know what I'm downloading later.
Really appreciate it. And it's just a great thing. So check it out at thebeardbunker.com. I will also include that link in the show notes for you later. Thank you, Charlie Brassley, for making something so awesome.
Rad.
Yeah, so that was me. In hindsight, maybe we should have picked, it's because it's been so long, maybe a couple.
Yeah, there was that.
But here we are. What do you got, Jody?
All right. Well, it's been a hot minute. So
my God.
All I could do to not pick like five. But so this though caught my attention and
so
my gosh, so good. So what I'm going with is I am going with just a paint thing, but my gosh, it's a good paint thing. Diz Ents, Dieter Rodelmayer, posted some Black Templars he's been working on.
These are conversions of Primaris, aren't they?
Yes.
It's
Primaris Black Templars.
They're the new Indomitus Marines.
Yeah.
But the robes are so good.
Robes and the weathering and so grimdark. This is what to me Black Templars are supposed to look like.
Dude.
Just battle worn,
Could you imagine?
hard as nails.
Oh, could you imagine a whole army looking like that?
He's got it underway. This was one of a variety of posts he's put up. And if you go check out his, again, it's Diz, and if you go check out his Instagram, he has a step-by-step tutorial of how he does this.
I'll create a link to his Instagram
beautiful
in
work.
the show notes as well.
And the fun thing is scrolling back through his Instagram and internet stalking just a smidge, the improvement and the evolution of him as a painter was another fun thing to see, because we see some older Black Templar paint jobs that don't kind of have this level of weathering going on and such. And
the weathering makes these guys
beautiful, but the control of the overall palette and the filters and the style of weathering he's done. I know he used some oil paints and things along the way, but this is just a incredible, beautiful forest.
Are the robes all green stuff?
They have to be.
I hate them. That is
I don't know.
So
honestly.
good. That is so.
It must be sculpted.
It must be. It's sculpted. Beautiful.
Yeah, and it is a faction. Like the picture I included in our show notes is just of a squad, and he's posted that on our site. But if you go scrolling through or just look up, again, Diz, D-I-Z, if you just look up his posts on the community page, you'll see some of the character models he's done and the evolution of this force. And it is to me,
And by the way, just for the record, if you are a member of our Facebook group, you can search under the hashtag elite choice, all one word, and that'll bring up the stuff that we've been talking about. Please do not use that hashtag in the group. That is for admins only, and show hosts only, specifically for this reason. But yeah,
so you'll be able to brazier in the back, really perfect.
The brazier on his
brazier, he could have put one on every model, but he chose just one, just to kind of be a nice little.
But the skulls on the back of the others, it's just all the right details. Awesome. It is grimdark in the grim darkness.
Such a great example too of how white doesn't need to be white to register as white.
Nor does black need to be.
Nor does black need. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that is so far off from being white, but
so much brown,
everything around
tan,
it still registers as white, but obviously a dirty, battle grimed kind of.
These guys have been fighting for a while.
Like they clearly still look like Templars. Nobody looks at that and goes, "Are those
those Dark Angels?"
Yeah.
To that point, also on the line of the black, if you look at the weapons, which they would be maintaining, the weapons are black, like what we'd traditionally think of it as black, but
they're
the
clean.
Armor is dirty.
That's an interesting
point.
What a
great little detail that I hadn't noticed. But yeah, great point, Justin, about. I remember one of the first times I was on the show, Jeff asked me like, "So how do you paint white?" And my answer was, I don't. I just don't. Like, why would you do that? Don't do that. It's a terrible idea. Use it as a highlight, sure. But anyway, great job. Beautiful. Just a beautiful and evocative piece, set of models there. Justin, what
very cool.
Who'd you pick?
I had to give John Trapman a shout out because he's just such
that guy.
He's just such an. I know he's like a buddy of mine and all that, but he's just such like an ambassador on the community page.
Absolutely.
And I always jokingly call him Bert Kreischer, the machine, because he is just a machine. Literally, like he must not sleep or something. I don't know. He's just pumping out like a whole Necron army and all the stuff he's been doing on his terrain work, like with the rust effects and everything. I'm just continuously impressed by that dude, and just keep it up, man, and keep being a part of the community.
Yeah, I remember when I went out to Austin to Doug's place when he had moved out there. And I met John, and he was kind of I don't want to say just starting this journey, but he was kind of early on in the journey. And now I look at him, I'm like, oh my God, the amount of stuff you are putting out far exceeds the normal person.
Yeah, he's a very efficient painter,
Yeah.
I want to say when he did the class in Houston, he was painting like 3 dreadnoughts at the same time or something like that. I'm like, dude,
I have to
show off.
I have to check the roster, because I don't know how many times John has been mentioned.
Yeah, I think he's
bordering the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
thing. So we'll have to take a look. So yeah, well, guys, I'm anxious to just get into the show.
Yeah,
it's been just way too long. I don't want to repeat everything we just talked about, because we spent a good 2+ hours talking 40K and just fun and in the codex. So it's going to be a long episode. Bear with us. We'll be back with another episode, hopefully sooner than a month and a half. But we are heading into the holidays. Hopefully we can get a little more free time. Things might begin to loosen up. We got to just play it by ear at the moment. Generally, we try to put out 2 episodes a month. Clearly, we have not been on that course for the last month and a half.
We'll do better.
But I am trying to get an episode out. To that end, we do have a Patreon, and for members of that Patreon, there are certain things that they get for being a member of that Patreon. One of which is access to our Discord channel, but also an extra episode a month, which is not in this vein. It's a little bit different. It could be off topic a bit for 40K specific, but it could also be us testing out new segments, that kind of stuff. I have not been able to produce that, so I actually suspended payment for the month of November for all Patreon members, because if I can't keep up my end of the bargain, I'm not gonna accept funds. And so I may even suspend again. It depends on what I can do in terms of getting a little caught up on those.
Yeah, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I super appreciate those people, and I want them to feel like they are getting their money's worth when they contribute to the success of the show. So anyway, there's that. We're if nothing else, we're all about fair here.
Yes.
Try our best.
Right?
Especially when it comes to power level.
Like when we play with the same points or the same power level.
Oh, wow.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We hope you enjoy the show. Let's get into it.
Matt here to welcome you into 2020 and tell you about an amazing new offer from Table War. All returning customers receive an extra 10% off Table War's US web store. Need a tower case? 10% off. Need a new fat mat? 10% off. Need a macro mat, geomat, or just some accessories? All 10% off. This offer starts January 1st and will continue on throughout 2020. No coupon required. Just ensure you have an account and this discount is automatic. This is our way of saying thank you to all of our loyal customers. So visit us today at tablewar.com. Table War. Table War is a registered trademark of Table War Designs, Inc., all rights reserved.
All right. Let's kick it off a little bit of hobby progress. It's been a while.
It has been.
Oh, boy. All right. Who wants to go first?
Mine's short. I'll go.
Okay.
I packed all my stuff.
Yeah, you did.
All of it. I moved again. Move has been made. I live in a world of boxes. It's glorious. The new place is good, and knock on
your new place is beautiful.
Yeah, we're very excited. Thank you. I am enjoying every time anybody walks in the living room. There's a full pause of like,
wow, look at that view.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I'm like, I did exactly that when I came over. I was like, oh, it's just so open.
Yeah,
I
the living room and the deck that just look right out on a lake is pretty great. And so there, if you don't know, there is a housing problem in the Bay Area and coastal regions of California. It's pretty tough to find somewhere affordable to live that you get to stay. So, you know, everybody's jaw drops. So I'm like, yeah, I think we've been in Santa Cruz for 8 years and this is my 5th or 6th move.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And then I felt better because one of my colleagues actually moved the exact same weekend and it was her 9th move in 10 years.
Wow.
So I'm like, yeah, these are, not people who can't make ends meet and stuff. It's just crazy.
Right.
So anyway, I live in a world of boxes. Prior to the move, I was chipping away at just kind of odds and ends. I painted a few Iron Warriors that I had lingering on my desk, but moving's the worst and it takes up a lot of time. So
yeah, well, we've heard from Adon.
Yeah, there it is.
You haven't even unpacked yet.
No. So I can 4 or 5 more episodes. I'll be able to talk about that.
Been doing any reading?
It'll be like Adon is here.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of student essays.
Yeah.
And a lot of student work. That's my reading time. And it's kind of doom and gloom right now in my hobby world. There's a faint flicker at the end of the tunnel. The upside is there is that element of unpacking and rethinking kind of how do I want my hobby layout to be and learning from past
nice
uses
clean slate to
deep clean of the mechanism, as it were, maybe a little too deep clean, but there is that positive spin of getting to
taking it down to its component parts and
it really and there's it was interesting before.
You've done the biggest reset the mechanism of any of us.
This is just as deep as that should go. Though Justin, you were mentioning off air about like buying paint brands and stuff and these frequent moves have actually caused me to kind of rethink that a little bit and watching a lot of Marco, the NGM.
Guy's so awesome.
He's so great. He's such a good teacher.
Hello, guys.
That YouTuber, but he's all about like limiting his palette lately. And it's something I'd gone back 2 years ago. So that's, I think is at the fore of my, like when I do kind of rebuild and reboot is.
Do you need 50 Shades of Grey?
No.
Did anybody really?
So somebody save us though. Tell me somebody's done something.
Yeah.
I will take this banner. I will charge up that hill and plant it in a filthy mountain. So
Justin, let's go you next. You actually accomplished something.
Harlequins are still on hold. I've just been Nurgle has hooks in me, rusty hooks. So I'd been doing a lot of building, and it was kind of like one of those things where I would build one unit, and then I wasn't in a big painting kind of mojo mode.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, one more unit. Let's build another unit. Let's build another unit. So long story short, I built a ton of stuff and ended up kind of batch painting it. I'm kind of doing it all at once, as I often do. But the big thing, which is kind of sad, my buddy Eric hooked me up with a good price on a Terax drill.
Okay.
Which is,
I know you've been talking about that a while.
Yeah, and I put a ton of work into this thing because obviously it's just an Imperial basic, chassis. So it needed some Nurgle loving, and I did a bunch of like press molding over like relief detail from like a Forge World Land Raider door set that I had, and painstakingly added like chaos trim to like the entire thing.
Oh my goodness.
And skull faces and tentacles coming out. And I hit it with this Dremel bit that's kind of like a rounded tip to add the pock marks to it.
Yeah.
And rusty effect. I went nuts on it, right? And I can't take it anymore. With the new Forge World book. So
narrative play, you can take what you want.
Yeah,
I can still take it. I'll have to ally it in like a Chaos Space Marine detachment. So I might end up like repainting it in the Purge. We'll see what Games Workshop does. I'm not going to do anything drastic, but I'm definitely kind of pushing it.
This is the glory of narrative gaming.
That's true.
Because you're just like, yeah, bring it. Cool.
It's very true.
I don't have a problem with that.
And to be fair,
meanwhile, this Titan will represent a dreadnought, okay?
For sure.
Different levels. Different levels.
Yeah, it was still a little sad. I'm not going to lie, because I do tend to play more match play.
Sure.
Kind of.
Yeah, for sure, without a doubt. And I totally get that feeling.
And to be fair, what I was planning on doing with it probably wouldn't have made me any friends, anyways. So it was probably for the best.
Well, how long have you been in this hobby?
49 years, I think.
Not the first time this has happened to you, then.
Not at all. Not at all.
49.
My Corsairs are crying 49. Into their little pillows.
How long you been in this hobby? Well, if we count this year, 3,200
We're talking past
years.
life? Past life? I'm pretty sure past life I was in as well. But I built him, and then I went on to build, I have the Nurgle Plague Hulk.
Yeah.
The big kind of, I've had him forever.
Oh, I love that model. And they don't sell it anymore.
Yeah, I've had him forever, and just sitting there like, one day I'll get to you, And I don't even think he has rules anymore. You just have to use him as like a soul grinder, or whatever.
Yeah.
So
which is a real shame, because that is a great model.
Lots of.
But you could use him as a soul grinder,
Well, I'm using him as a defiler, and I clipped off his big sword arm.
I used to use the soul grinder as a defiler in my World Eater's army, because I just thought it looked cool.
Yeah.
I was like,
I definitely prefer the soul grinder. I mean, that's the converting 3 of them, but and then needing to do my own Plague Hulk. So I'm really anxious to see what you did with yours.
Yeah, it was a simple conversion, but I ended up adding just a bunch of pipes and tubes to him.
Sure.
And I added like a shoulder pad from like the Mauler Fiend, or actually it was from a Hellbrute. Mm-hmm. I added an armored shoulder pad just so I could kind of carry the color scheme from the bottom kind of up, kind of armor him up. And I did chains that are like holding it like in it,
awesome.
Hooked into his flesh. And I took the big canister that comes from the bloat drone, like heavy gun, added that to his back, and just chains and hooks and tubes, and his arm, I gave him the scourge, the power scourge.
Okay,
so I just chopped off at the wrist the big sword that he has, and I took the flayed the kind of flare arms from the Mauler Fiend, I believe it is, and then just sculpted flesh around it so it looks like it's just shoved into his arm.
Nice.
He's got it up in the air, just ready to come down. Really fun model, and he came out great. Super happy with him, and defilers are just awesome now, especially with the War of the Spider
and the new blast rules.
The new blast rules, the fact that you can pay command points to give them disgustingly resilient. So I've actually been playing with defilers in my last few games, and they're insane,
which is good because they were pretty much terrible.
Yeah,
I mean they just weren't worth taking.
Yeah. I mean, you couple that with the Warlord trait with the Ironclot Furnace,
and
it's got a 4-up invulnerable save and a 5-up DR save, and it's regenerating a wound each turn. It's
going to take a minute to kill that thing.
He did work. So I got him built, and then I built a bunch of the characters, picked up a bunch of those guys from Herrick Games. Thanks, Sky, you're the man. I got the Tally Man, which is the guy with the little...
I thought you already had him.
Didn't have him.
Oh.
Nope. I didn't have him. The War of the Spider book made a lot of these characters pretty tasty with some of the relics you can take.
Cool.
And I was planning on getting these guys anyways. It was just kind of like a process of elimination of kind of what's effective, and then I get to the models that I really want to paint.
Yeah.
But they are just so awesome. I got him built up. I got the Plague Surgeon. That model, I couldn't bring myself to convert that model at all. Like I was looking at
Liked
it, I'm
him
like,
that much.
I just can't. You're perfect. It's just the perfect sculpt. I built the Noxious Blightbringer. He's the grenade guy.
Yeah, awesome model.
Super cool. It goes on.
Man, you've gone fully. I'm looking at the note. You've gone fully back into your Death Guard at this point.
It's Death Guard Phase 2. All the units that like the War of the Spider kind of made good, and just units I've had sitting around forever, and I'm now getting to. The 3 Myphetic Blight Haulers, also known as the Nurgle Roombas.
Those might be my favorite new Nurgle unit. I think those things are awesome.
They are so awesome, right? And especially with multi-meltas going to 2 shots.
Yeah.
Zooming around. The problem with that kit though is that it's an easy build. So, and you see a lot of guys out there that run like 9 of them. Like I'm only,
and they all look the same.
And they all look the same.
Yeah.
So back to the conversion block. I had to, and thankfully when you buy one of the blight drones, they give you a bunch of different faceplates.
Oh, that's nice.
So you're able to easily
Swap
cut away
some
the
of
front,
that
put a new one on.
The old Eldar jet bike move.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing about that, okay, they're easy fit or whatever they call it, easy put together or whatever. At least they're plastic.
Mm-hmm.
At least they're plastic because, back when you just had the metals, it was just like, yes, it's metal and you have one sculpt. Like,
yeah.
Sculpting on that or adjusting a metal model is a lot harder.
Absolutely. Yep. So again, just I tried my best to make each one kind of look individual, and just different spikes, and I would carve parts away, add parts, and they actually came out pretty cool.
On that note, I want to diverge for a second. Is there still any drama around losing metal models? Like, do you remember when they were eliminating metal models? And of course they did go to Finecast, which didn't do well. But now they've moved away from that. The qualities are so good at what they can get out of the plastics.
I think the advent of so many companies offering resin anymore has kind of put an end to it. I mean, when you're trying to build, say, an infinity model and it's still cast in white metal, whatever version flavor of that you want. And it's a little teeny tiny fiddly thing. There's no part of me that's like, why isn't this in resin? It would be so much easier to glue together and get into position and to or convert, or I don't know. I haven't heard anybody be like, unless it's on the Old Hammer group, which is wanting it for an entirely different reason.
Correct.
But those guys are all just complaining about lead rot, So
yeah, well, that's the other part, is getting to watch people. How do you fight lead rot? Well, you don't.
Why are my hands twitching?
That's Nurgle. But yeah, no, I haven't heard anybody grumble about, gosh, I wish this was made out of metal in a long time.
Yeah, I think like the only gripe I hear with the new kind of G-dub style is just like everything's kind of monopose, quote unquote, But it's, at the end of the day, it's still plastic.
But I mean, that's my kind of where my next stage on that is exactly what you're saying. Like, but now you can shift it, Yeah, there's a little bit of work involved. I'm not saying there isn't, but there's also, because it's plastic and because there's so many kits and bits now, as you just talked about with your the Plague Hulk. I mean, you can swap out tons of things that still work,
Yep.
The easy fits are a little bit tough because you don't get extra parts.
No.
They're so you
need to pull from other stuff.
You need to pull from other kits and questionable age and scaling. We were talking about that as I packed up, I found a box of old Chaos Marines, just regular old Chaos Marines. And I was like, oh, I should pack these because
they're bits.
And then I was like, no, because these bits are terrible compared to the new Chaos Marines. And I
kit.
literally just threw it. I mean, it wasn't in, it was the dregs of a start collecting box that I'd already stole whatever bits I was going to steal out of it.
So you pulled in the dawn and just in the garbage it went?
Just dumped it. And I was like, I mean, we were late in the moving game, so a lot of things were just in the garbage. My wife says I move like a refugee, that I want to get down to a backpack and we leave. But is not in, she says
there's a certain
I'm
advantage to that.
Yeah. So she is more like, let's move every scrap of paper. And I'm like, anyway, that's a different story. But yeah, that I literally just, when I looked at the models, I was like, oh, but I really like this old Chaos Marine head, and I put it on one of the new models. It was like, no, I don't. And it just doesn't hold up.
Back in the day, you liked that Chaos Marine
But look
head.
at to go back to the plastic and conversions, the Indomitus box, the guy with the squared off sword that I can't think of his name right now.
The Judiciar?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly don't remember what the core model looks like, because every time I see one, it's converted.
Somebody's converted
Like
it.
they've changed, everybody's customizing. The head swap's my favorite because I'm not a big fan of it's just an aesthetic. But but I mean, case in point though, right? That like I literally had to rack my brain for a second there to go like, what does the actual model look like? Because I've seen so many conversions of it.
Yeah.
And it's monopose, and you can always tell that's that guy, but it's
sure.
They all do look different.
I think the biggest problem I sometimes run into with the easy builds, and it's like, I get around it. It's just it's hard to do sub assemblies.
Yeah, true.
Because the way they go together, so you find yourself
very much so.
To hell with that. Shoot a little shadow in there with the airbrush because I can't even get to it. So,
but here's the thing too: like if you can't get to it,
exactly,
nobody can see.
Exactly, and for tabletop.
You end up not noticing. I mean, especially, I find the Thousand Suns guys to be fairly static. I mean, they kind of are meant to be, right? They're automatons in a way, but it's like, at first it really kind of bothered me. I was like, well, but this guy looks just like this guy. And I turned the head a little bit to the side or something. I'm like, oh, well, okay, I guess he's you never notice on the table.
Yeah.
You have like your few, favorites. Like your handful of like, well, I like this guy a lot and I like this guy. And then the rest of the guys just kind of blend into the background for
Exactly.
me.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, back to your progress. Sorry.
So almost done with this Nurgle stuff. I also built the Greater Blight drone, which before was kind of like, I just never wanted to get around to him because he was so expensive. He was like 250 points.
Yeah.
And just didn't really do much.
Yeah.
And now he's not 250 points and he's worth taking. So built him up, did some minor conversions on him, kind of added a lot of tight like tubes and piping to him just to kind of give him more detail. A lot of spikes to the forehead kind of thing because his carapace was very boring,
compared to the new stuff, sure.
Spikes. It goes a long way. So I got him built. I had to get one of those bloat drones with the flesh mower. He's the lawnmower guy.
Yeah.
I had to get him. So I got him built up and assembled. Cannot wait to get to the gore part on that model with the Yoo-hoo glue and the just guts falling off that thing. It's going to be fun. And all of the above, I sat there and airbrushed it all at once. Literally just put it on a tray. And I got it all airbrushed up using primarily Pro Acryl paints. Yeah. They're still loving them.
Yep.
And got them all up to the kind of CK Studios ugly stage. So technically I could game with them. And now I'm at the point where I'm taking one unit at a time and going through and painting the trim and finishing them up. So I put another probably 3 or 4 hours into the 3 blight haulers.
Yeah.
Those are kind of what I'm focused on. But yeah, just a lot of Nurgle.
Wow.
A lot of Nurgle. Yeah, but my plan, I want to really get through this chunk and then get back to my Eldari. Yeah. Especially with the new Forge World rules that came out. And the Harlequins, of course, got to go back to them. But yeah, just really enjoying it, having a blast.
Well, it has been a while since we recorded, obviously. As our listeners know.
About a month and a half, 2 months worth of work here, I think.
A month and a half. Yeah. The scheduling's been tight. There's been, COVID stuff. There's been just, and we don't typically record separate. I'm not a big fan of the sound quality I get from that. So, and just life's been busy. Mm-hmm. So in that time, Horus Heresy Book 9 came out, which I picked up and arrived.
Of course.
That's how long it's been. I got some Goliath Forge World parts for my my Goliath Necromunda gang. They released some really cool stuff there, so bought into that. Sisters of Battle Mortifiers, I bought those because as I started, if you listen to Shrine of Chaos with Mini Wargaming Dave, I joined his show earlier this week for about an hour or so. And so you heard me talking about, as I started assembling my Sisters of Battle force, I suddenly stopped and I was like, wait a minute. Why am I just assembling? Oh, this model looks fun to assemble and let me assemble it. Let me at least have a crusade list and work towards that, because 50 power levels
pretty quick
to put together. But now I'm working towards a plan, and in that plan were my mortifiers. So I've added those.
Which ones are those again?
They're like the what do you call it? The ones that they put the fallen people in to, like, why am I drawing
penitent engine?
They're like the other penitent engine. Basically.
Oh, got you. Okay.
Yeah, it's just a different version of the penitent.
Is that the one that like has like a casket?
Yes.
On the front? Okay.
Yes.
Got you.
Yeah, that's one of the units I'll be, one of the very few units I'll actually add to my sister's force.
By the way, thanks for bailing me out with the penitent. Just drive. I'm like, what?
I couldn't remember what the heck a mortifier was. So I was like,
that's
well,
exactly
I don't
what
know
it is. It's a version of the penitent engine.
Rules wise, like how are they different from a penitent? Do they have like just
different weaponry.
okay?
They have the
There's still
flails and the heavy bolter options, right?
That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'd have to go back and look specifically, but there is a reason they are in my list.
Cool.
So and then we started planning for Custodes. And damn it, if I didn't buy some Custodes.
This is the most
I fell victim.
show of force problem that I think has ever happened.
Before we've even recorded and talked about it, he's already bought it.
Okay, yeah. So maybe
that the army.
Adon did buy a Dark Eldar army. But that was after we did the show.
This is before the show's recorded.
That's funny.
That it happened. And not only did you buy the models, does that go a step further?
Well, no.
Okay.
I bought the models at this point.
What did you buy?
I see what you're talking about. Well, hold on a second.
Okay. Okay.
I bought them through the Facebook trade group that we use, the Barter Bucket.
Yeah.
You know, I saw somebody put some up. It's got a couple little Forge World pieces in there. I was like, all right, cool. I'll take that. Then I stopped because I looked at, I was like, well, let's hit the Forge World site. And I started, everything was sold out.
Yeah.
Like, nope, not in stock. And I was like, saving grace.
Yeah.
Because then I was like, wait a minute. That's right. The new Forge World book, compendium is going to come out that has all the rules for 9th edition for Forge.
Sure.
So let me hold off and see what is worth purchasing here. Well, I've just received that book 2 days ago. And so I haven't had a chance to really go through it yet. But, look, it's not going to be a big force.
It'll be a crusade force.
Famous last words.
If there's any army, though, as we'll talk about later.
It doesn't need to be a big force.
Yeah, I think this one, it gets to wave that banner more than any other. But yeah, we'll see how that goes, Carl.
Yeah. I got bit like super hard and I was like, oh, look at this. It's sitting right here. And, when the car hit my house and damaged the Astronomicon, it caused some damage to some models. And so I got the reimbursement from the insurance company. And it was models that I wasn't
justification
really
phase.
using anymore. Yeah. Look, I'm not hiding that. It's a definite adjustment. As I'm buying it, I'm like, I really don't need another army.
What's need got to do with donuts? There we go.
And I'll talk about the game I played later, but I did also purchase a new Table War half case, which I already owned one. Long story short, we had packed a bunch of stuff into my Table War cases in case, during the fire issue, in case we had to leave, I was going to grab those things and go. And at least I had my 1,000 Suns and Demons. So,
okay.
But as I played a game, as you'll hear later over at Doug's, oh my God, as I'm sitting here thinking about what I'm going to say, this is such a first world problem.
We are on a podcast about tiny toy soldiers.
This is embarrassingly. Yeah. Well, let's take it to the next level.
All right.
I drove over to Doug's and I was like, well, I'll just take my main Table War case, the tall one. It has everything in it already. I have my list here. I'll just pull from that. Not
Sure.
It doesn't fit in the front seat of my Porsche very well.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yep. Didn't see that's where that was going.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So this is my solution, but here's the thing. Okay. Let me justify this piece too. Here's the thing. It was too much in that case anyway. Like I didn't need all of that stuff. And if Crusade is good for anything, it's slowly building up a force. And those mid-tower cases are like perfect for 50 to maybe even 100 power level based on what you have in that army. So I was like, yeah, I'll just pick up another one of these. There's a sale going on right now.
Nice.
They're like 15% off or something. And so I was like, I'll just buy. And if you're a returning customer, you get additional percentage off.
Sweet. Right. Yeah, I need one of those.
And
in
if
my
you
life.
haven't,
Bad.
if you've ordered from them but not set up an account with Table War, but you've bought Table War stuff before, just reach out to them because you don't even have to have like an account that has purchased stuff. They'll work with you to make sure you get the returning person.
Very
bonus.
cool.
So I just forewent that and just placed an order because they're friends and I want to support them. And so I ordered another Table War half case, which I'll use just for like my Crusade force, right?
Sure.
And I just think that's nice.
And you could probably fit a whole custodian army in there too. So.
Oh, yeah, I guarantee you can.
Have they?
I didn't think about that.
I literally
Totally
watched
could.
Dave do that at the last Adepticon.
yeah, Todd carries his in that.
Todd, sorry.
Do they have the new table sizes, the 44 by 60
Yep.
yet? They do? Okay. Yeah, I'll be placing an order soon then.
Yep. So, yeah. So anyway, I've been assembling some more Sisters of Battle, Seraphim Squad, and some Battle Sisters, and work continues on the Astronomicon. The contractors have been working. They've repaired the outside wall and painted it, and everything looks back to the way that should be. My inside has all been drywalled and fixed. The new fireplace was put back in because the other one they had to throw out. And now it's about getting the cabinets and the wall completed, but there's like inspections that have to happen. And blah, blah, blah. And so I'm thinking, honestly, in about 2 weeks, all the cabinets will be done at this point. They're pretty optimistic that they're very close to finishing. So
Excellent.
Light at the end of the tunnel, man. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So
and light in the room.
All the plastic comes down that's in this room, and I can figure out what to do with that pile of stuff over there.
Looks like my garage.
It's absurd. That pile is absurd. So
on opportunity.
Justin, I'm also, since you're in the whole AV area, I'm also, you know how I used to have all the stored terrain up there? Not going to happen. We're cleaning out the garage area. I have shelving out there. I'm going to put pretty much all those totes of terrain out there, except for maybe the two most commonly used ones, which I'll just store under the table. And then up there, I want to get a larger TV. So we'll take that one down.
Above the fireplace?
Yeah.
So we'll definitely talk.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then that's tile behind it. So I don't know how we mount that.
We'll talk.
So that might
Easy
be an issue.
peasy.
Yeah. Okay, great. I knew you were the guy to go to.
It's a good reminder, actually. I have questions too.
But yeah, I mean, so I want to kind of, take this opportunity to kind of not fully remodel, but kind of rethink how the layout is, because, where you sit, as we were somebody was talking recently about game rooms and paint station. Oh, it was us. And it just seems so long ago.
Yeah.
But as I sit here at my desk, like looking over to where I have the TV is kind of counterintuitive. If I have it up there,
that would be
and
perfect.
It's larger, then I can display like painting videos and stuff up there, which would be handy. So
75-inch OLED coming in.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Yeah. You know what? With Christmas coming up, they're probably going to go on super sale too. So I grab
TVs they're cheap now. So very cool, man.
Well, they don't last that long either. And then as I mentioned, I joined Mini Wargaming Dave on his Shrine of Chaos show. I think it's the second time I've been on it.
I'll have to check that out.
He's a great guy and just loads of fun to talk to.
Totally.
And he and I had spent some time, he and his wife and I had spent some time on the Florida Adepticon. Like we were in the a vendor area at one point. And we just started talking, and next thing you know, like an hour and a half had gone by, and he and his wife and I were just really hit it off well. So he's a good dude. He's a great dude. So that's me for hobby progress. For games played, you mind if I just leap into mine real quick? So I played a game against Doug. It was my first Crusade game.
Nice.
So in that game, I brought my 50 power level that we were going to play. At least I thought I did.
Oh, man.
As I began unpacking stuff, Doug goes, "Man, you get a lot of stuff for 50 power level." And I said, "You know what? Let me double check my list." And I looked at it, and my Excel sheet was not calculating 2 lines. So I was actually at like 70 power level, which I'm really glad he caught for a number of reasons.
That's like 3 Vindicators.
Yeah, right?
It's like that's 20 power levels a lot. That's not nothing.
It was
Ain't cheating, ain't trying, huh?
well, I got to win some games somehow.
I was gonna say he is a win.
The worst part
player,
is the worst part is I typically lose the game where I have like something like that, like the Vindicator one, the famous Vindicator story. I lost that game against Ed, even though I had an extra Vindicator. That's embarrassing.
How long ago was that?
Oh,
still just
years ago. So, but here's the thing. Obviously, I didn't intend to have too much, and I'm really glad Doug because when I saw his, I'm like, oh, he doesn't have very much, and I'm like, oh, I have a lot, and so something didn't feel right, and then Doug's, I looked, and it was an easy fix, okay, well, I'll just remove these things, that's fine, and now we're back down to 50 power level, but if you're playing against me, I encourage you to check my sheet. That's all I'm saying. I am not. I think that's going to be my first go-to now as the game's starting. Here's my sheet. Please check my math.
I see why you play power level now, because points would just be a nightmare for you, man.
It's hard. That's a lot of numbers.
That's a lot of numbers.
Math
man.
is hard, man. You know what? Have you ever heard that thing about the Barbie? The math is hard. Let's go shopping. Like there used to be this talking Barbie, and you'd press its back or whatever, and there were things it would say. And two of those things were two different things. Where one of them was math is hard, and they got all kinds. Mattel got all kinds of grief. But the other one was let's go shopping. Right. Oh. As I think about it, that might summarize my podcast.
Or capitalism.
Math is hard. I can't add all these points up. Let's buy some more stuff.
It's a little on the nose, Carl. I'm glad you said it.
Well, I'm nothing if not honest. So,
and you were using your T-Sons?
I was using my Thousand Sons. And I want to talk about that, and then I want to talk about Sisters real quick, because you brought up something about your Nurgle guys being ready to play with. So yeah, I brought Thousand Sons. Doug played his Imperial Guard. Great game, fun at Doug's place. We did not like the suggested size of the board.
Tiny.
The
very tiny.
And I want to emphasize this: the suggested minimum size of the board.
Yeah.
And that is very important. As people are talking about, as you just talked about, do they sell the new size mats? Yeah, they do. That is the suggested minimum size of a game of that size.
Yeah.
I feel like that 50 power level size that we were looking at offered very little in the way of maneuvering for either army. And it felt, and so did Doug. And so I was like, well, let's not play on this size though. But this is the size. I said, this is the minimum size.
Yeah.
So we stretched it out to, I think we played on like a 4x4. Great game.
Perfect.
I got to move around. He got to move around.
Yeah, I felt the same way when Chris and I rolled bones, because my Harlequin jet bikes were turn one charging him. And I'm like,
it just doesn't feel.
I mean, for us, it was like our first game, a 9th, I think. So it was more like, let's just see how this game plays. Right. It wasn't as much.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
You still spend all that time, because it was a Crusade game as well.
Yeah.
Naming your characters and doing all this. And we probably should have done the same thing of, let's stretch this out a little.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying that smaller size. But to your point, yes, first turn charge. And I'm like, okay. I spent a lot of time in 7th edition learning how movement and positioning changes the game. And actually, we used to talk about how that is the most important phase of the game, is your movement phase. Once you begin moving and positioning, that is super important. It may be not quite as tight now. 7th edition, you had facing of vehicles and all that, but it's still, I think, an important part of the game, and I think it's a fun part of the game. And so when you wind up in a situation where you're just like, game starts, I charge, great, okay, and you're like, cool, but not how I want to play. Yeah. And that's the great thing about the game, though. You don't have to do that.
Yep. Right.
Yep.
So, but I mean, hey, whatever, float your boat, play it how you want. Doug and I expanded the table, and I think we had an amazing game. Unfortunately, I got caught up in the bloodlust. I hadn't played 40K in a while, and I, my guys are gunning down his guys are gunning down my guys, and at the end of the game, I actually had it, and I just got caught up in, I can kill this one more unit if I move this thing over here.
Off the objective.
And I'm like,
points, we don't need no stinky
why
points.
did I do that? And so Doug ended up taking the win, and he was like, I don't understand why you did that. And I go, I don't either. Yeah. I was getting excited about killing stuff.
Bloodthirsty Thousand Sons.
But you know what? It was fun. Like, and as I was talking to Dave in the Shrine of Chaos thing, I think is why I don't care about win or lose. Like, as long as I'm making progress and having fun and shooting stuff and getting shot, and then I'm like, was I like, why did I do that? Yeah, of course. I was like, why did I? That was really dumb. But, I left going, that was a really fun game, man.
Yeah. Exactly.
Without a doubt. Like, super great. It was great to be back playing.
It's always fun with Doug.
But it was also just great to be back playing.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's been a while for me. So then I want to talk about Sisters real quick, because you talked about, I got these guys up to this paint level, and then I play with them. Another point I talk about a little bit on that Shrine of Chaos thing was, I know that our group, and myself for a long time, like, we're only playing with painted models. I've paid to have a lot of models painted so that I can, get things out there in a level that I don't want to spend all the time doing, and or maybe I'm not capable of doing, and at this point. But I thought back to my Death Guard, and when I started that army, I built it, and I wanted to learn how it played, and I started playing with it, and it was all primed, and then it got all undercoated the red that I undercoat it, and then I did all the various green dry brushes that I did on it at the time, and I was still playing with it at that time. But every time I played, you were seeing units developing and becoming closer and
progress.
closer.
Yeah.
So to me, I've never played an army like a Sisters of Battle army, and it's plays very different than a lot of the other armies I've played. And so I think for me, I'm gonna get up assembled what I think is an army. I'm gonna base coat it, start working on it, start playing with it while it's in progress, see where I stand, go, oh, maybe this unit is the wrong unit. Maybe I should swap something else out. I did the same thing with my Thousand Sons. Like when you and I, Justin, were first playing and I was playing my Thousand Sons, like I was getting kind of wrecked because I had 2 10-man squads of Rubric Marines, which are super expensive. They're tough, but leadership rules and end up breaking. And I was like, I need something to screen these guys. Like, and it didn't occur to me when I made that army in that list that I should really put something in here.
You learn so much about your faction by playing games.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, does everything have to be fully painted all the time? Like,
no, but I strongly feel it needs to be moving towards
it, or even
in our group. I mean,
how long does it take to? I literally sat there with that tray of models and airbrushed the entire thing in like 3-4 hours or whatever. And
you are also an exception to the
shaded
rule.
But I mean, even with rattle cans, if you're doing a custodian army, spray it gold and paint the robes red.
There you go. You've started, right?
Next time you can throw the wash down, and at least it's just so much better than gray plastic.
I completely agree.
And I think for me, that's always been the line. Is like, I'm perfectly happy to play somebody that their army is a work in progress, as long as it's a work in progress. It's when you show up
month after month
and it's nothing's
no
happened.
progress.
It's like, oh, what did you work on? Oh, I didn't have time. Next week, oh, what'd you work on? Oh, I didn't have time.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, what'd you work on? Oh, I don't like this unit, so I built this unit.
Yeah.
Now there's like, I've actually watched the go backwards thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it was all primed and had, the robes were painted red, and then suddenly gray starts showing up because they've taken so long. New units have shown up.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. No, as long as there's progress happening.
I think it just has to be a forward momentum type of situation. Because that's probably what's going to happen with my sisters. Jesus, the model detail on those sisters, and quite frankly, the scale of them is smaller than I paint. Like they are significantly smaller than Marines, and so it's going to be a challenge for me.
It's interesting that you think they're that. To me, they're very similar play wise to your Thousand Sons. Like I don't see.
Are they?
I think so.
Interesting,
but. I could be wrong too.
I'll see as I put them out there and we see what happens.
Yeah, right? I'm not super versed on the latest version of the Codex. I haven't taken for a spin yet. I was still playing in the index rules, but traditionally they play very similarly to the Thousand Sons. It's a different kind of durability.
Yeah,
but is this
we'll
kind
see.
of that's I don't know.
We'll see. And I could be totally wrong.
I'll give you a wall of orcs to shoot at for another couple months.
God, I've heard those the heavy sisters now that multi-meltas are 2 shots.
Yeah.
Because they can move and shoot the retributors.
Yeah.
8 multi-melta shots coming down range because they don't suffer penalties for moving or shooting either.
Right.
So food for thought, man. That'll smoke a tank.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm very excited about the army and just the quality. And I said for years, if they come out with sisters in plastic, I'll buy them. I made good on that promise. I bought them. Now I got to get them together and play them.
Do you know which order you're going with?
Yes.
What color? I don't know the name.
The Order of the Bloody Rose, I believe. I'm going as the red armor. Mm-hmm.
That'll look good.
Mm-hmm.
Copier.
I saw is that what yours are?
Mine are red, but they're not that order.
Now I'm changing.
Okay. Yeah. They are red.
No. I think originally I was going to do actually white armor with like purple cloaks and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do that.
Nope. I want to get them done.
There's so many good ways to do white, though.
I know.
Okay.
I know. And I thought about it.
Like a nice cream white with the purple.
But here's the thing. I'm still doing black, and I just kind of want to move away from those kind of whites and blacks into something. And I have no red army. I have my word bearers, but I'm going to end up selling those, I'm sure.
And mine are the old, will always be the old models. I mean, other than a couple of vehicles, I'm not switching over. So you should do it.
Yeah, I finally, like, as we were, as I was reading through the codex and reading the things, and I saw a fantastic version of the Order of Bloody Rose paint job, and I was like, oh, that is
there you go.
Gorgeous.
There's your answer.
Yeah, so that was what sold.
Do it.
Anyway, I've digressed long enough. Let's talk games played. Justin. We've also been doing a bunch of role playing. Still.
Yeah.
Lightning bolt. So I managed to. I'm pretty sure I played like a couple games since we've last recorded, but I'll focus on one.
Sure.
So my buddy John, who I recruited into the hobby, I warned him.
When you talk to other people about Jody and myself, do you go, my buddy Carl or my buddy Jody?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Sure. Or just
I was just going to feel left out.
That guy Carl, that guy Jody.
Son of a gun.
A friend of mine who I recently acquired.
An acquaintance. I wouldn't say friend.
No, so he's a coworker of mine, and we've become pretty close. And he just is one of those guys. Whatever he gets into, whether it's bikes or cars or what, he is like fully in. Mm-hmm. And so he got he got the Indomitus set from Sky, from Herrick Games, and he has. I would say he probably has about 1,500 points of Necrons.
Wait, was John the guy I met when I went down to your place and you were playing your good buddy Bob?
My good buddy Bob, yeah. So good buddy
John was nice.
Good buddy John is killing it, man. His Necrons look phenomenal. They look fantastic. His bases have like texture paint, grass tufts, flowers. I'm like, all
right, I hate John already.
I mean, I'm like, damn, dude. And he came over and I showed him a few little tricks with like blood effects with the Tamaya, and showed him a couple little things here and there, but I'm just impressed. I mean, he already has a flyer painted up for the army.
Has he ever painted anything before?
He used to do model kits as a kid.
So some experience.
Like tanks and airplanes and stuff like that. But and he had always been interested by the 40K hobby. Sure. And seen it. And I was kind of like the thing that pushed him over the edge into it. Yeah. So he came over. We played a 500. We tried to do power level, but I was like, hey, let's just go over points. I wanted him to probably should have done power level, but we did 50 or 500 points. The combat patrol, we just did the first mission out of the book, and we had a great time.
And
I used the Death Guard, and I tried to keep it simple. We used like the basic stratagems from the book. Yeah. 'Cause I kind of explained, I'm like, dude, the stratagems are a rabbit hole
that you will go down. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we picked like a handful, like 2 or 3 from our book, just because I skimmed through the Necron book, which I got to buy. That book is awesome. And I was like, this one's good. Focus on that one. But we mostly just used the basic reroll, stuff like that. And just had a blast.
I find when you're teaching a game, like that's actually just use the core ones. Mm-hmm. As you learn the basics, now know that you have a bunch in your book that are specific to you that you may want to look at.
Because it's enough for him to focus on
and when I do that, it's both. Yeah, when I do that, it's both players just using the core ones.
Yeah, I think that's a good move. It's certainly it's just a good teaching strategy. Pull some things away.
But man, the new Necrons they're brutal. Yeah. They definitely put up a good fight, and we just had a great time. So many more games to come, and in like a week or two, he'll probably be at 2,000 points. So we're going to step it up. Like next game, we'll probably do 750, and then we'll probably go to 1,000. Yeah. Just kind of do like an escalation kind of thing. And he's already pinging me like he's in bed looking at the stratagems like, oh, I could have done that. Oh, I could have done that. Don't worry.
I keep getting called from Mason. He's like, how should I fade out my Tyranid warriors? And I'm like, well, I don't know. How do you want to fit them out, Mason? There's a lot of options. And then he came back, well, I gave, one guy each this type of gun, and then I gave these guys a close gun. I'm like, that's a great option.
There you go.
Totally. I would say the highlight of the game was a Poxwalker brought his the new Scorpec Lord.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Put a wound through. Yeah. He was on 1 wound left, right?
The Scorpec Lord?
Scorpec, the Triarch, kind of 3-legged guy's brutal. And he regens a wound every turn too with the living metal rule. But brought him down to 1 wound. I got 1 wound through with the Poxwalker. I'm like, okay, don't roll a 1. Rolls a 1. I was like, no, wait a minute. You haven't used your command point reroll.
Another one.
Yeah. I'm like,
never fails.
So not only do I kill him, but I get a zombie.
But also,
how's that even work?
But also,
doesn't make any sense.
Let me tell you about how that command point reroll rule works. If you rolled a 2, you're going to roll another 2.
We've adopted in that sports football game that I play a lot of. You know what rerolls are good for? Seeing the same side of the dice
same number
twice. That's what rerolls are good for.
That is absolutely true. What about you, Jody? You moved.
I moved. No, actually, but prior to the move, Matt moved. And
that's true.
Because apparently we do everything together. Matt moved, and his new place has a really nice little backyard. And Brian organized, let's get the Santa Cruz dudes, some of us together for a little backyard 40K.
Yeah,
try it out. Nice. I had my Iron Warriors were up to the to a level of a Crusade.
Yeah.
56 power level. We played 56 power level.
Nice.
It's Carl math for 50 power level.
Because that's literally, I was like, I'm playing everything I have painted it's 56 power level. That's what we're playing. And they were like, why is it 56? I'm like, look, I'm playing with everything I've painted. Anyway, so I got in 3 games, none of which were with Brian, who wasn't able to attend. But that's
Wait a minute. Didn't you just say Brian was the one that said, let's get together?
Uh-huh.
And who didn't show up?
Yep. Uh-huh. He was dearly missed, and it was lovely. We had a barbecue
with every shot so far.
Jeez.
It was a sad time, but he's gotten back in the groove now. It's just good.
Yeah.
So I got in 2 games with Matt and 1 against Josh.
I really like that guy, by the way, Brian. Like, he is very fun to play with and just a really nice stand-up guy.
Yeah, no, and also somebody who gives as good as he gets.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It fits my just fine. Yeah. So first game, Matt bust out his Gene Stealer cult. A lot of this was me taking the approach of I have no idea what the Iron Warriors are going to do. I haven't played Marines in any flavor in multiple editions. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know that I played them in 5th.
How did it feel to have saves?
Yeah, right.
It's weird. I'm used to having saves. The sisters have saves, so that part felt normal. But anyway, so there's a lot of learning. So I went 0 for 3. Punchline on this story. I'm going to jump ahead to the punchline.
Sure.
0 for 3. I got smoked 3 games in a row. First one, it was particularly brutal. On the opening shooting phase, Achilles Ridge Runners with multi-shot las cannons and Brood Brother squads with las cannon teams just because I'm fielding lots of demon engines.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't after the first shooting phase. So they were
Are you guys using a good amount of terrain? Like line of sight blocking terrain at all? Or
we were adjusting to the new table size.
Yeah.
As mentioned, I had not accounted for how deeply, you need to really bury your stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't be like, oh, there's cover, or oh, there's this. It has to be. I mean, it didn't hurt that the Ridge Runners maxed out their number of shots every time they shot.
Right.
That round.
that never helps, yeah.
But I was like, oh, well, this thing's back and it's kind of in cover and it should be good. No, stuff needs to be fully out of line of sight, which on a really small, tight table like that is pretty difficult to do because you're pretty limited. We don't build our tables. We just kind of build the table of this looks cool.
Right.
Now roll off and go and play with what you got. So the setup we had, there weren't a ton of spots where you could have put things that were totally out of line of sight without them being also completely in the backfield.
Right.
In 9th edition, you got to
They're out of line of sight and completely ineffective.
Yeah.
Right. But as tight as the table is, I don't know that that's as much of an issue. That was kind of my big takeaway on the day was, wow, deployment is now, it was always a big deal. It is an incredibly big deal now.
Especially if you're not going to have much movement.
Right.
Right.
Because that's where
there's your movement.
Right.
transports you, man. Taking rhinos.
Which is in a pickup. Josh had some old 30K style rhinos that he wasn't going to use. He did a little hookup for me. And
Nice.
So at some point my iron wears when I can hobby again and know where my airbrush is buried in my garage, I'll be able to paint those up. And those are way up at the top of the list because Marines on Foot did nothing. Chaos Marines on Foot were, they for 3 games they did.
By the
0.
way, I probably have some rhino kits around here that if you decide I want to add some rhinos, just talk to me first because I think I have 1 or 2 somewhere.
Thanks. I got a pair of the old 30K style ones.
Oh, okay.
I like that for the
little tiny ones though? Or
this is the add-on kit.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yep. So, but
No,
either
that's
way, definitely. If I go bigger,
Well, no, you can't have mine now.
Okay, cool. So
I'll take them.
Well, the iron this force is supposed to stay small, little
I got
crusade. Force.
Oh, like my Custodes force.
Well, yeah, we'll see.
What kind of demon engines do you have painted up for the Iron Warriors now?
I have a Hellbrute and the Venom Crawler. So I started with the Shadow Spear box and then added in the old Dark Imperium box.
Yeah,
right.
And then that was the basis of let's start with that and then see what we're doing.
And the oblits and stuff.
Yeah. And the Greater Possessed, which actually big learning was holy cow, those guys are no joke.
Yeah, they are not a joke.
They do
They're
work.
really cool.
Amazing models
really
too.
Yeah, and they're beautiful,
so good.
beautiful models. So second game was against Josh against the new Necrons, and we had to wrap up early. Josh ran a little bit short on time. He had the game in hand. It wasn't, they're a weird turn of where the objective turned out to be.
Yeah.
Kind of made this might be a little bit in doubt, but he was doing fine. I don't hate the new Necrons because I was not a fan of playing against Necrons for years. I basically
it could be frustrating.
Wouldn't play Josh with his Necrons. I'm like, look, man, it's just not fun. Your stuff doesn't die. As an orc player, that's I don't mind if my stuff dies as long as your stuff, like
Your stuff dies too.
like that we're playing, right? That's how does 40K work? We both set up stuff and take it off the table. Like,
Right.
that's at its core. So it was really nice that no, they do come off the table. They're super powerful. Again, opening salvo, they were like, "Hey, pull your Hellbrute," and I was like, "Those are Necron warriors." And, yep, all right, pick it up. I'm like,
Nice.
"Already, cool." Floop. So off he went, and then they did what Necron warriors I think are going to do, which I love because they're the core unit.
The new Necron warrior models are just great too.
They just look awesome.
So
and that army I love of his with that bright kind of shiny orange.
Yeah.
It looks great. And Matt and I played a second game. We went back because Josh had to take off. And we're like, well, I got another one in me. Do you? Because we were playing these small games.
Right.
Played against his Tyranid army because he has a full Tyranid army now. I did better this time. With the Greater Possessed, we're really kind of moving and grooving and causing damage out there, and was able to navigate them through terrain and get some use out of them. Understanding the Master of Possession is kind of a strange unit where he's buffing demonic units.
Right.
Yeah.
And his abilities are kind of interesting in the way, like, you kind of link synergy things together. There's definitely the Chaos Space Marine book. It clearly has a need for, stacking synergies and overlapping.
Yep.
That's how they're going to run. So there was a lot of, again, that learning on my part of like which abilities actually matter, which don't. Hellbrute got smoked the first time it got shot again by a Tyranid army, which has like such limited shooting. And
Poor Hellbrute.
Bloop, bloop, bloop. All right, pick him up. Man, I would love for that thing to be a demon engine. Looking at the model, it's hard to get your head around that it's not.
Yeah, just giving it a 5-up invul would go a long way.
Yeah, just one out of those 3 shots that smoked it. But I mean, every time it was getting hit, it was like 6 damage.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen, right?
Yeah, and so it was fine. And it was, I wasn't using it correctly. Like everybody I've talked to is like,
Also, the interesting
linebacker.
thing is, like you can use that guy and then he gets taken out like that. And you're like, these things are terrible. It's like, well, no.
Right. Use it different.
You maybe use it different, but also your opponent also rolled very, very well.
Right. So my takeaway was...
Because when I played Aaron, one of the first times I was playing Aaron, he had Necron Immortals on the table. And for whatever reason, like I could not kill them. Like he just kept, no, they're coming back. And I'm like, and I was like, these freaking Immortals are aptly named. Like, man. Yep. So I was like afraid of Immortals for like the longest time. And then like I was playing, I'm like, well, I guess I attacked the Immortal. Yeah, I just wasted the Immortals. And I'm like, I may have oversubscribed to the theory here.
Yeah, so there's always that question, right? Of like, am I using it correctly? And were the dice wonky? And I wasn't using it correctly is like, that's checkbox number 1.
Got
is
it.
Jody, play better. And I was like, okay, well, that's fair. But then, one of the things I realized is that at 6, as it's a 6 power level unit at a 56 power level game.
Yeah.
That's so guess what my crusade
played
was
at 50 power level.
Hey, look who's not going to make the cut. And I think also Hellbrutes that are designed like your Thousand Sun one is just shooting. Like
that's all he's designed for.
Right. And I built one that is just close combat, which I think is valid in terms of like,
but you got to get him in there.
Right. He's got to get in there, but he's going to be good at it. That
once
even
he gets in there. Yeah.
The multi-melta currently having just 1 shot and the claw and like there wasn't a clear role for that.
Right.
Especially at a small power level.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a good choice at that size game.
This was kind of one of the things I learned early on about dreadnoughts too, as I started the game. Because originally I was like, oh, this guy's got like a dreadnought close combat weapon and a las cannon. And what do you think of my list? And this guy's like, what's the purpose of your dreadnought here? Like, is he going to shoot or is he going to get in close combat? Because you want to really commit to one or the other. Like you're kind of dipping a toe in. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting point. Like I hadn't really thought about it. And so as I put my Thousand Suns list together, I was like, and I need more shooting, dreadnought.
Right.
Or Hellbrute or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I've always kind of taken him with the last cannon rocket launcher.
Yeah, it's great.
Put him in the backfield.
It's great.
But
yeah, I have another
until they get charged, and then I'm like, oh, I wish he had a close combat weapon.
Yeah, I got another one in the hopper that I just because I love the model, I want to build one out, and I want to try and redo the legs because the legs on that kit are just they look cool the way they're sculpted, but they're they're for a dreadnought that's like half as big.
Yeah,
they're
little stumpy legs.
Little
so I want to
toes.
try and sculpt up some more dynamic legs or something a little more robust that looks like a fire platform.
There was somebody selling an out of print Forge World boxed Black Legion dreadnought on that barter bucket recently, and I was like, do I want this? And I was like, no arms. I'm like, because I do have the old Forge World Dreadnought for my Thousand Suns, and I love him. Like, I'm a huge fan of the Contemptor Dread. Like, that model, I love.
Yeah.
But there's something about that box dread in my Thousand Suns that I just love.
Yeah,
that guy.
I'm the opposite. Contemptors don't do a ton for me, but box dreads I think are the bee's knees. So the Hellbrute for me is like, because it's like this twisted box thing that's awesome. So anyway, a lot of learning. That was I haven't been on the show in quite a while, so that was a few months ago that happened. But it was outdoors, and we got to get some games in and roll some dice. And
fantastic!
It's awesome.
That alone was well worth the price. And like I said, I genuinely like approached the day of like Matt. It was funny, Matt, in that opening salvo when he was like, pick up your army. He like was feeling awful. I'm like, Matt, you're supposed to win. Like,
how many times has Matt played his Tyranids?
I don't know. Oh, I don't have any idea.
I hope that's his first time, because then he gets like overconfident.
No, he's played him a fair amount because he's redesigned, and he wants to foolishly. I gave him the like, do a gargoyle swarm.
Yeah.
Because it looks awesome.
It does.
And he started on it, and I'm like, that's awesome. And he's like, these aren't effective. And I'm like, why do you think nobody does it? Like, all narrative, like just to see him play it, like I will narrative whatever the heck I got to field to make it an interesting game.
Yeah.
Just because that's such a cool concept. But really is. Man, he turned and burned on that Tyranid army, and it looks great.
And then if you buy into the Forge World, what's it? No, what's the flying one?
Oh,
Herodon.
Yeah,
Herodon, I think it is.
Yeah,
that model is gorgeous,
and it drops out.
Yeah, it drops out gargoyle. I mean, but it is gorgeous.
Hey, man, you're spoiling the plan. Like, I gotta inch him along down this path.
What colors?
I have a bio Titan.
Oh yeah,
I'll sell him.
I don't think I've seen his bugs yet.
He went with Kraken, like they're
nice
blue and. The purple
fleshy,
and
might have the wrong one. The red and tan.
Yeah, the red and tan.
Nice.
I believe
So
that
there's
is
kind of a fleshy tan and then red carapace.
Very cool.
And he went with a really kind of earthy brick red that looks really good on him. It's one of his favorite Vallejo colors.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, it's a good looking force. And then
is it Ferrari red? Is that the one he's using?
No.
Oh, because that's.
I think it's literally just called dark red.
Okay, because the Ferrari red, like over black, looks very brick colored initially.
Yeah, and he's got a whole narrative about like the Gene Stealer cult and the Tyranid thing and the Brood Brothers and the like.
Yeah, I mean,
whole
see, that's the cool thing
from-
too, is that he's chosen an army that really complements his Gene Stealer cult army too.
Right.
So now he's got like thematically, you guys can do a whole lot with that.
Right. And for Crusade, I think he's planning on doing like an Imperial Guard style detachment.
Awesome.
So then he's going to have Brood Brothers cult.
Awesome.
Like the whole thing, which is great. Because for me with the demon stuff, I'm like Iron Warriors, cultists,
Awesome.
That whole thing is the evolution. So
sweet.
looking forward to having those all dialed in.
All right. Well, that's our getting caught up piece. Let's take a break. We're going to come back, and then we're going to delve into the Talons of the Emperor for our Show of Force episode. We will be right back. And we're back. And now we're getting into, finally, seems like forever till we got here. I had to reread the notes I wrote like a month ago.
It's been a while.
Show of Force, Talons of the Emperor. For those who don't know what our Show of Force episodes are, at the beginning of every codex, up until I think maybe 7th or 8th edition, there was the statement, why do you want to collect this army? And so we really kind of seek to answer that question. We're going to look at the army from kind of all perspectives and talk about it. We won't go unit by unit, but we'll call out a few favorites. We'll talk about the history of the army, et cetera, and how it kind of fits into the world of 40K. And so the Show Force episode here, Talons of the Emperor, obviously refers to the Adeptus Custodes, who are kind of one of the newer armies to the scene in 40K, like on the tabletop. Mm-hmm. But in historical sense, they've been around for
a long time,
almost
tens of thousands of years. So so we'll be talking a little bit about that. Anything you guys want to kind of lay out before we get started?
Let's do this.
Let's do it.
I had never played Adeptus Custodes. I had played against them a handful of times before getting into this. I will apparently be playing Adeptus Custodes in the somewhat near future. But one of the things about this army that I find is interesting is, we had Grey Knights who were kind of the elite of the elite.
Yeah.
And then
These guys came around.
we got more elite. And I was like, do we really need this? Turns out I do. But in my experiences, I have both been trounced by this army and crushed this army. Really, and I kind of know why both those things happen in each of those games. Every time I've won against Custodes, I've always felt like I could have lost this game if this person had done X, and they just didn't play.
If they had just rolled better.
It's usually not even that. So, anyway, the army, the first codex for it was 7th edition, and that came out in March of 2017. With the follow-up 8th edition codex in January of 2018. In between then, obviously, we had the indexes that came out.
Right.
So it hasn't been around a long time. Here we sit near the tail end of 2020. It's been around a little over 3 years at this point.
But blew everybody away when they came out, those first models.
Couple of appealing things about them. Small model count.
Yep.
Models are fantastically sculpted. Plays very different than a lot of types of armies.
Super elite.
Yeah. So within the context of kind of 40K, the game itself and the mechanics of the game, the historical kind of view on this is that, as we said, it was initially released in March of 2017, and it was a bit of a surprise move for Games Workshop to release these. It was, as I said before, the Grey Knights were kind of the elite chapter. We saw towards the end of 5th edition, Grey Knights really crushing it on the tables. Yep. And what was interesting about this is it was kind of an answer that Games Workshop had to Forge World's release of Adeptus Custodes for Horus Heresy Gaming, or 30K. I remember when the Adeptus Custodes came out for 30K, very exciting. They were all Forge World models, vehicles, units, etc. And then all of a sudden, Games Workshop drops plastic Custodes in the game. And my initial response to that was, really? Like, do we have, can we not, is nothing sacred?
Do the Imperium need more units?
Honestly, part of that was probably that as well. And I felt like Grey Knights kind of got unseated in their eliteness as a result of this. Like, I was like, well, okay. And now, my typical stance on these things is I have this initial knee-jerk reaction of, I don't like this. And then I go, okay, I like this.
Yeah. Well, especially as it's been flushed out too. And, more and more Games Workshop Prime units and Forge World units. It's a lot of stuff to choose from, as we'll get into.
Right. But in those days, of the Forge World Games Workshop studio, Forge World would release models with test rules kind of in advance of actual play. So it's kind of likely that the models here were released, their models were kind of released in advance of rules coming out. So what I'm saying by that is the models, what would happen is the models would get released by Forge World without supplementing rules. Right. And then shortly thereafter, and they were usually in support of a book coming out.
Right.
And so if you saw, hey, Forge World's releasing a bunch of Tyranid models, well, the next Imperial Armor book they're probably writing has to do with Tyranids.
Yeah.
And they would release test rules for those things.
I think it's worth pointing out here, too, that the Custodes made good sense in 30K as to why they were available and why that faction was something suddenly you could play, because they'd been in the lore well before this. So it made good sense that, like, hey, here, in 30K, here they are. And I think initially part of the knee-jerk reaction, certainly I share in that of, like, wait, they're in 40K now?
Yeah.
What? Like, initially it didn't make narrative sense for the very little that I knew about them. Yeah. It felt really disjointed. So even though developmentally it made some sense about, like, how, like, the release of models is what I mean developmentally.
Right.
Like, that made good sense. It, like, narratively, it felt really strange.
It felt like it was a bit of a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
Right. A solution looking for a problem kind of thing. Like it was why are we doing? But
I will say the new book does a good job of
exactly
really getting you to feel like, okay, these guys do belong.
Yeah. And it makes really good sense.
I'm with you 100% on this. I'm with both of you. That when it came out, I was like, but aren't they now kind of relegated to just defending the emperor in his throne room? Like, isn't that kind of, they're the guard of the. They
stay on Terra and they protect the emperor, right? That's all they do.
Right. I mean, you have a mission. Like, stick to your mission, man. Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane.
Grey Knights.
Say the Grey Knights.
Yeah.
But it's very different. Like they are two very different jobs.
Yeah.
Which I mean, that's what we're going into.
And I do remember when they came out for 30K, which was the Inferno book, which was the siege of Prospero and the battle against Magnus.
Yep.
Which is where they belonged. Like they were there along with the Sisters of Silence. And you're like, okay, this is, oh, cool. And I felt like, oh, cool. They are releasing Custodes. This is really neat. In 40K, as you said, when it came out, I was like, but that doesn't make sense. As I have learned more about it, oh, okay. I like what you've done here. Right. Okay. I can see how that makes some sense. And especially as we've moved into ninth, I mean, the stance, especially with Rabute Gilliman coming back saying, look, it's all hands on deck. Right. Right? Yep. Everybody get up here and start fighting. We need you.
Yeah.
And they also serve a number of roles, as we'll talk about. Right. So it's been interesting. And then, of course, the benefit of Games Workshop releasing Custodes was that now you had them in plastics, not resin, a little more readily available. Yep. They are pricey, even in plastic, because... And people may say, well, I only get 5 models and it costs $50. Yeah, that's inexpensive. That's $10 a model. That's kind of pricey for a plastic, but they're not selling a lot of them. Right. So when you're running a business, if you're selling thousands of something, you can make those cheaper and make it up in volume. Here, they're not selling as many, so you pay up front. But you don't have to buy as many either. So
exactly,
kind of set there. But it is, I guess the point I'm making is that it is, as you look at it, you go, well, I don't need that many models. It's sneakily not cheaper as an army in that sense. Like,
right, it's like a Knights army, right? Like,
right.
You field Imperial or Chaos Knights. It's like, oh, I only need three models.
But
those 3 models are not cheap, and
right.
And then if you want options, and
then in the end, you spent just as much as you would.
Right, and that's one of the things I don't know if a lot of people really look at and realize is relatively speaking, if you want to buy an army for 40K, there is and I don't know what that number is, and I'm not frankly interested, but like there is a rough price point, and GW is aware of this, that this is what it costs to buy an army to play this game.
Yeah,
and regardless of which army you play, some are a little bit more, some are a little bit less, but you're going to hit that.
But they're probably pricing in that area.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to need
you're going to
X
land
amount.
in a certain range.
Yeah.
And that's it. And there's not a huge variation.
Agreed.
From one to the next. Start collecting boxes.
Yeah.
Or aftermarket, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the interesting thing there too is that Forge World now offers resin weapon options for some of the plastic models, which becomes kind of nice. It allows you to vary things up a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. So, how do the Custodes fit into 40K? We kind of touched on this a little bit. They're the Emperor's bodyguards.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's what I think at its base level, that's what we think. Oh, well, they're the Emperor's bodyguards. They also can be emissaries. They can be a force in their own right.
Right.
We saw and there's going to be some spoiler alerts in this episode. We saw in Master of Mankind, they're a force to reckon with against chaos, especially when mobilized in large numbers. And each man, I once heard Aaron Dembski Bowden describe during a Black Library Weekender that I went to, and he was talking about, I don't remember the context, but he was talking about an Ultramarine. And he's like, you have to understand that every single Marine, whether it's an Ultramarine or whatever, but let's take an Ultramarine. Every single Ultramarine consists of the best generals that we've ever come up with, wrapped into one package of this. And I would argue every single Custodes is basically an army unto themselves.
Right.
In this case, they say, Marine can kill 100 guys, hyperbolically speaking. Custodes can fight for weeks nonstop,
Right.
just reloading weapon.
Yeah, one of the important things about their design is they're effectively immortal, right?
Yes.
That for all intent and purpose.
Yeah, they're made differently from Space Marines.
Yeah, they're not. It's not the
Very
same craft.
much so.
It's a whole different deal.
Yeah.
You have an interesting note here about the work of art, Carl.
Yeah. And I was talking to John French about this as I was doing research for this topic. And we were talking about how Marines are made. And he was kind of like, well, Marines are kind of butchered together in comparison. You tear out these things, you put in these other organs. Yeah, you artificially grow this, and then you speed up their growth evolution. There you go. Here's your Marine. Where every Custodes is a work of art, crafted
From their bodies to their armor to their weaponry.
Yeah,
Their minds.
crafted
Their
by
minds,
the Emperor, right?
And rumor has it, like, even down to like their cellular, like their soul.
Yeah.
Even has.
Well, I mean, effectively, they are taken as infants,
yeah.
and turned into these gods,
Right.
Which, and then embedded with psychic, or not psychic, but psyche altering, mapping and
and
all
they learn
this.
like everything.
Yeah.
Like just every manner of warfare and even like politics. And these guys are just basically plugged into the matrix, and very few human minds can actually keep up with that amount of information.
Yeah. And that was the term work of art is a term that John sent me, and I don't know that he came up with it necessarily, but it was probably in discussion with other Black Library authors that they were talking about this at the time, and it like snapped it into focus for me when he said that. Right.
It's, and I don't have the name brand off the top of my head, but I know there's like a Rolex is a really nice watch.
Yes,
it's a beautiful thing, but there are watches you can go to professional watchmakers where they will literally build you from nothing a custom watch. And these things are, you have to go to the watchmaker craftsman, and it takes years and years and years. And literally every part is hand sculpted, and every gear, every peg, so it moves perfectly.
Yeah.
And they are, again, yes, a Rolex is a beautiful piece of machinery. That this pocket watch, or this thing that's been crafted by hand, is a work of art. They are things that go in museums. They aren't things that people use to just keep time. It's a different level.
That's a really interesting comparison.
So it's this idea of, and that resonated with me in reading through the Codex. And I do want to say, you asked up front, and I guess maybe that was when I should have said this, is, for me, it was, I know the Custodes are the guardians of mankind, and literally I've never played against them on the tabletop. I've certainly never played with them. I've seen them played and like talked to people who play them, but like my knowledge level going into this episode was, I got to kind of tabula, I'm going to use the wrong phrase, but like blank slate. Right?
Yeah.
I just knew almost nothing. So it was like a lot of learning and research on this
You're
one.
very fortunate.
I do know, like, that was one thing that came across really early, was like, no, they're nasty, which they should be. But the thing that Codex really, I felt like, does a great job of driving home is these beings are crafted to be the guardians of the Emperor.
Yeah.
And they have to be worthy of that. And not only worthy of that when he was alive and crafting them, that they had to be his peers. Like, effectively, he was crafting peers.
Yeah, they're not brainless,
No. And in fact,
advisors.
They are
really.
advisors and people he can bounce ideas off of. That's a really interesting point too.
Right, that they're this, the phrase that the book uses a lot is demigods.
Yeah.
Right, that they are, if the Emperor is a god, which they don't believe he is, but that
in the hierarchy of things.
Of the hierarchy of things, they're the angels to the god, right? That they are, not the angels of death. They're not cherubim. They're this almost peers. They are right there with him. One of the things I was mentioning, Carl, that I took away, also along that idea of the work of art and their development, is that the way a guardsman looks to a Marine as being this iconic thing, a Marine would look to a Custodes with that same level of reverence and like, wow, this is so far beyond what I am.
Yeah.
And that scaling for me, really, that line really clicked when I was reading the Codex of like, I didn't appreciate how developed these guys are, like how incredible this fighting force is supposed to be. Almost to the point of, much like the Tyranids are big on a level, it's hard to get your brain around the Tyranid, right? Like, what is that? This hive consciousness that stretches bigger than our entire galaxy. Like, that's hard to imagine.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Right. The degree to which these beings have been perfected, it's hard to get your head around. It's something else on it. It's on a whole other level.
That work of art phrase, as I said, it snapped clarity for me. Much like there was I want to say Praetorian of Dorn is the book. There's a point where one of the Imperial Fists is talking to one of the gene crafters on the moon, and they refer to Dorn as like a creature. And he gets really offended about it. And then they explain how he was assembled from pieces of, the genetic material of the Emperor, as well as this, that, and the other thing. And it wasn't until that point that it occurred to me that Primarchs are not, they were never human.
Right.
They're fully crafted.
Yeah.
They have no relation to us.
No.
Yeah,
there's a reason that
they have 2 legs and 2 arms.
Gilliman's so much bigger than everything else. It's no, they are giants. They are these.
They're literally, they have no connection to humanity other than mentally they've been designed to perform this function.
Right.
Which is in a way kind of sad.
Right. Whereas you could argue that the Custodes are in some ways much more human.
Yes, because they came originally from human stock.
And while they are,
interesting.
Crafted and developed into these super beings, they are still, but that said, they also, on some level, the Custodes, even we were talking a little bit about could care less.
Yeah.
About,
what was the comment?
So there's a quote actually very late in the codex. I love these little call out windows, the little quotes and things. And so this one
nuggets in there
really, really resonated with me of sure, these guys are these crafted super beings and in some ways are very human in their design, but they also, their entire existence is to see threat and to see danger in the world of humanity.
Yeah.
They don't even trust Marines because they're well, look what happened last time. Right.
They got a point.
Right. So it's Telchor of the Custodian Guard says, the Emperor's realm is a festering ruin of overcrowded worlds drowning in their own ignorance and fear. It's a tumble-down ghetto that burns from end to end with flames of war. They do not deserve the Emperor. They do not deserve us. None of that alters the fact that our duty must be done. The just contempt dripping out of this Custodes regarding the people that he guards in his role. But it is...
They don't deserve us.
I have been designed by the Emperor to do this thing, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
What's unworthy.
And they also, they do have a big chip on their shoulder too, because obviously they failed in their work, right?
That's a great point.
When the Emperor was laid low, they all painted their armor black and they were pretty sad for a bit. Yeah. And it's just a chip that they bear to this day. And it's really interesting to see kind of how
but it's the other thing that's interesting to me is usually that kind of contempt is just before some kind of fall, but you don't feel like these guys, they won't fall, right? They're the rock upon which everything can be built.
Right.
But usually when it's you don't even deserve me, it's the next step is why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Right.
But I think they literally cannot think that way.
Right.
Back to the demigod thing, right? That makes perfect sense.
Yes.
It's interesting.
So let's talk a little bit about how they're organized as a force, because they are fairly large. And when it's at the top is kind of the captain general of the Custodes. And this guy usually sits among the High Lords of Terra. So he'll usually hold a position there. But he is the undisputed leader of the Adeptus Custodes force and what they will and will not do. Mm-hmm. And the other interesting thing here is having a seat at the table of the Lords of Terra means he is not beholden to what they say to do. If they're well, the Custodes need to go here, that's not going to happen. Or that, yeah, I agree with you. That's what we're going to do.
Right.
I'll take it under advisement.
Yeah.
And of course he's probably, the greatest of the the Custodes warriors, not just in martial capability, but probably in thought and that kind of thing as well. And he's also probably has unfettered access to the Emperor on the Golden Throne, should he need it, or if that even does anything. We don't even know at this point.
Right.
Yeah, because nobody has
but
the
he's
power.
Not talking.
Nobody has the power to like an Inquisitor, for example, or even Rabute Guilliman has the power to demand the Custodes do anything, right? They can just request.
They can certainly demand. but it won't.
Exactly.
But,
like they're just their own entity.
And the interesting thing is, I mean, the only thing I have to compare it to is my work, where at the level I'm at, everybody at that level is expected to bring ideas and thoughts and solutions, not we have problems, right? It's here's what we're going to do. And there can be a bit of, well, your group needs to do this. And, there's times where I'm like, yeah, my group probably should do that, whereas this guy is like, well, your group needs to do this. I'll decide what my group needs to do.
Right.
Yep.
You have no say in this.
Right.
You'll be lucky if I agree to do what you would like me to do.
And I think this command model, like I like the way that it permeates down throughout the entirety. Like that kind of absolute authority thing never breaks.
No.
Like it's whatever version of Custodes you're interacting with.
Yeah.
They have absolute authority.
Even down to like the individual Custodes.
Right.
And we saw in the Horus Heresy series when Horus gets betrayed and is sliced with the dagger that ends up corrupting him and all this. There is a Custodes there. There is a custodian guard there who gets attacked by the word bearers at some point. And he kills like 15, 20 of them before they're able to drag him down, but he's there to oversee like the emperor's instructions and right. will, and that's his role. As we see later, they're now used as emissaries and that kind of thing. They were probably in the past too.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, we're going to go make contact with such and such. Let's send this custodian guard.
Yeah. And they literally speak with the voice of the emperor.
Absolutely.
It is that's how they're viewed, and that's what they do.
Yeah. So immediately below the captain general, there's two tribunes. They're the senior members of the custodian tribunate. It's a senior cadre of 10 veteran custodes that form kind of the Adeptus Custodes War Council. So and they're the advisors to the captain general. So these guys are kind of the ones that manage the day-to-day as well as the long-term kind of goals and direction of the custodians, the Custodes.
Much like the emperor had the custodians to bounce ideas off of, the captain general has this council to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's all this information about they have to have earned like all these names to ever even be considered.
That was one of the cool parts of the books. I didn't
Yeah.
realize they had, and they'll acquire more and more names as their kind of persona goes off. And they have to have so many names before they can, and they're often named after like gods of old or just super cool.
Yeah. I love that kind of detail. And I think it was Dave from Mini Wargaming that was talking about that. I was just like, this rabbit hole of fiction around this game is truly impressive. I mean, when I started playing, I had read all of the, what did they call it? The omnibuses, right? Uh-huh. There was like maybe 8 omnibuses of novels that had come out individually and then been put together, and I was like, oh, omnibus, I'll buy it. And I read the Soul Drinkers one and the Ultramarines one, and I read everything there was for 40K. I cannot do that now.
No,
it's hard to keep up.
There is no way, and I am a fast reader. And a fast reader of poor fiction on many occasions.
You just got to learn to multitask, read a book, and then listen to one on Audible at the same time.
At the same time, that would be the only speed. That would be the only way to keep up. It is incredible the amount of lore and detail, and there's always more like individual. Like, they all have these names, and some author made that up, and then it stuck, and now it's a piece of the lore. It's
well,
awesome.
right, and that begs the question, like, well, what do these names look like, and so on and so forth, because they mention it, but then we don't get a bunch of examples because newer army. Whereas 10 years, 20 years down the road, what is the Custodes? We'll have this down to squad level Shield Captain Bob and his name and all of his titles. So it's amazing that they can always write in those gaps.
So we go from the custodian tribune, the tribunates to then the prefectorate and shield captains, and these are kind of the more you're getting down to kind of like line warriors and that kind of thing, and then ultimately they have tons of different names, Supreme Castellans, Aquila commanders, master of guardians, all based upon kind of what branch they're in and what have you. Because as we'll talk, there's kind of like Marines, there's flavors of custodians as well that perform different functions.
Yep.
And then the other thing to really add, and we've kind of harped on this a little bit, is that the Adeptus Custodes are a department of the Adeptus Terra, but they're only answerable to the Emperor. Period.
Yep.
I think an Inquisitor would have a very hard time bringing.
Truly, yeah. They're not used to being told no.
Yeah, and I don't know that you could ever even doubt an Adeptus Custodes. You know,
right?
Like that would be an interesting conflict to see at some point. So then, although the Legio Custodes were supposed to be around 10,000, approximately 5 Terran years into the war within the Webway during the Horus Heresy, which they talk a lot about in Master of Mankind, they're reduced to around 1,000 custodians due to the constant warfare with entities of the warp. However, now in the late 41st millennium, they've rebuilt their original strength to about 10,000 warriors. So that's about how many there are. Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
But they're a force multiplier.
Yeah,
they are.
Truly.
So I don't think when we look at how they've evolved over the years, I have some of the original 40K Horus Heresy artwork books, like before it was ever a Forge World thing.
The card game.
The card game, yeah. That's where a lot of their artwork or inspiration, I would say, probably came from,
Yeah. I mean, they were depicted there pretty much how they're depicted now.
Yeah.
I mean,
tall helmets,
physically, yeah. But clearly the roots of like what they are and what they serve is still there, but I think it's been expanded upon quite a bit.
Yeah.
Especially in this latest codex where we see, the various factions of them and the structure and everything. All that got fleshed out. And that's pretty much, but they've always fundamentally been the protectors of the Emperor and the guardians of the Imperial Palace, period. So the last thing I'll kind of say on that is that although they've kind of reforged themselves back up to their numbers, since the death of Horus and the wounds inflicted on the Emperor, the Legio Custodes renamed themselves the Adeptus Custodes because originally they were just called the Legio Custodes. And after the reformation of the Imperium, done by Gilliman in the 31st millennium, so after, he says we're going to break up the
legions of
the
Marines,
legions, we're going to do all that. They've taken a more limited role, acting just as the protectors of the Emperor. So they kind of went insular after, as we talked about, after their failure,
right?
And the living death of the Emperor. And then just a couple other early notes here. They're also known as the Auric Mortalis, or the Golden Death. The dread guardians and only living beings permitted in the Emperor's presence, unencumbered, meaning they're the only ones that could be there alone.
Right.
And the other interesting thing about that is just a little side note, and this kind of speaks to one of the things I've always wanted to do with a Custodes force if I started one, and I am going to do, is when they spend time in the presence of the Emperor, the Golden Throne gives off radiation and energy and all this stuff that their golden armor actually blackens over time. So it looks like kind of like tarnished and all this. And this is, I can't remember the name of the material it's supposed to be.
Auramite?
Auramite. Yeah, which is supposed to be, better than ceramite by a long shot,
right.
Of course. And so as I do my force, I think I'm going to have like the leaders of each group kind of have like that blackened look to their armor because they've spent their cycle in the Emperor's presence.
That was one of the cool parts of the book where it was talking about the one guy who had, like, even though these guys are insanely powerful and advanced and they can do all these things, one guy for like 100 years just literally stood there watching the Emperor. And after 100, can you imagine 100 years just standing in the same spot?
Well, and I love that part too, because they talk about that it's a meritocracy, right? Yeah. That it's purely like if you're on that guard duty for that 100 years, and that was made it a big deal, is this guy was able to do it because you have to be at the height of your senses the entire time.
Right.
And like what an incredible
They're not just standing there thinking about
right. Because as we've heard, like who knows how many like secret coups or hidden assassination attempts that they've stopped. Nobody will ever
That's
know.
something they do internally too, right? With the blood games.
Yes. Yeah,
which
talk
is really,
a little bit about that.
Really cool. So they basically have these dudes that go out and they're purposefully trying to infiltrate Terra and trying to like other custodians that are trying to
Sneak into the Emperor's room.
Yeah, just to kind of find chinks in the armor of the weakness. So they're constantly trying to like test each other through these blood games. And I thought that was really cool that they're not just resting on their laurels and saying we're these demigods, that they're actually testing each other from within.
Which means it's kind of like probably for older people listening to this podcast. It's probably kind of like Inspector Clouseau in the Pink Panther, how he hired Kato to like
ambush him.
Attack him at any time so that he was always like on guard. So these guys are like,
right.
Our last cat was named Kato, and that's why, because like when he was a kitten, he'd just ambush you for no reason. And Aaliyah was always not now, Kato.
So we just dated ourselves.
They were big time. She's younger than I am, so it's fine. No, but that idea of going back to them testing each other in the meritocracy and like the whole thing of like, so you're on guard duty for 100, whatever your time is, and you have to be so incredibly at the height of all of your custodes abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point you're being monitored and they're like, you're slipping a little bit, buddy. And they bring in some young guy. There's no, like it calls out that there's no animosity when somebody has to step down and they're replaced, even if it's like a brand new neophyte, because the only thing that matters is, no, this guy's performing at this level. So we need him in that spot.
Yep.
This, oh, you're a shield captain. Cool. Well, but this person's showing better ability. We're going to put them in and you're going to step in.
There's no animosity, no shame.
There's nothing to it. Which did bring up one of my favorite things in the Codex, which just kind of fits in, I think, here is the Eyes of the Emperor.
Dude, I have this page open. Go for it.
Okay, so what happens though when they do eventually slow down, even though they're
a little millisecond on that sword stroke or whatever,
right? And so
it's so ridiculous. I mean, let's take a step back and talk about how ridiculous that is.
Yeah,
but it's awesome.
Functionally immortal, but man, that swing just wasn't quite what it used to be. I think I'm slipping.
Oh, that used to come faster.
Yeah.
So these guys, what happens is a few of them will just walk away effectively. Like they'll go, I've slowed down. I'm not at 100%. I can't fulfill my roles as effectively as I need to. But this guy is still, so far beyond every other being other than the pinnacle custodes. So these guys basically take the long walk from, isn't that Judge Dredd?
Yeah. It's very close. Yeah.
Wear a black robe
and take on the black,
and they go out into the world and they become what they're referred to as the Eyes of the Emperor. And they still report back to the custodes through hyper secret channels, but they're out in the world watching and following their intuitions and following what they've learned.
Keeping their finger on the pulse of what's going on.
Right. Yep. And so
that's pretty awesome.
I was like, man, I want to
see that model.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going.
They get rid of all their custodian armor and all their weaponry, and they just don these black robes. It's just like,
but they're clearly
cool.
They're clearly not human. They're larger than human.
Right. Yeah, well, if you think Cypher is cool and you're a Marine player and you're like, yeah, but he's a traitor or whatever he may or may not be.
Model up one of these guys. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh man, but this, like, where is this model that I can, if I can field an assassin, then I ought to be able to field an Eye of the Emperor. Like,
dude, that would be an awesome unit.
Right? Like,
or even just a single little elite character, that just deep strikes onto the board, YOLO. And just,
I mean, if the Keller morph gets to be around, come on. Like, so anyway, it was just this cool, again, those little call out boxes always get me. And this one, I was like, I want that model.
Yep.
It will.
Great minds, man. Great minds think alike. I thought the same thing. That's just too cool for school.
I didn't even notice you were literally on the same page.
Yeah.
So bringing us kind of current with the Great Rift opening in the era of the Indomitus Crusade, and the resurrection of Rabute Guilliman, and now his kind of ascension to Lord Commander of the Imperium. The Adeptus Custodes have kind of been forced to take a more active role, and this is how this is where. When we talk earlier about, I always just thought they were these guys that guard the palace. Yeah, they were. Now this is how they expand on their lore a bit. Yeah. They've now taken a more active role in galactic affairs. So a force of custodians has followed Guilliman and the Indomitus Crusade out into the galaxy and serve as heralds and torchbearers first. And this is done to kind of both exist to reassure kind of the current Space Marine chapters that the gifts of the Primaris Marines were indeed like ordained. They're okay. So, forces of Space Marines that were trapped on the other side of the rift, we've seen Custodes make that journey to get to them to basically say, here's how you make Primaris Marines. You can't doubt me. I speak for the Emperor. Right. I am a custodian.
This story is what, and this I'll touch on this later in when I look at a faction, is that was when it clicked for me in the new lore that I was like, oh, I see how they fit in now. I think the Cicatrix Maledictum and the Great Rift and that whole thing was the key, MacGuffin or whatever you want to call it, it was the plot twist that allowed this to go, now it works, now it makes sense.
Yeah. Otherwise it just would not have worked.
Yeah. Because now, as I said before, it's kind of all hands on deck, right? Like the custodians have kind of come to the hard realization, and this is a quote I'm taking, is that sometimes the best offense is the best defense, right? And so they've kind of come out and they're like, all right. And the reality is, and I strongly feel that this is underrepresented, especially in Games Workshop specific fiction, that the Cicatrix Maledictum is horrendously awful. Like, Abaddon has torn the galaxy in half, and the other side of that is not pleasant. I mean, we saw it in Spears of the Emperor. You get a look at it a little bit. There's intentionally a vague amount of time has passed. It's somewhere between 50 and 500 years. And because when I asked for specifics, that's what I was told. It's somewhere between 50 and 5. Could you narrow that down a bit? Nope.
Well, and because time doesn't work right anymore, like that's even within their own narrative, like it's a valid answer. Like, where are you?
Right.
It could be 50 or 500 years.
So, they have, it's honestly just giving them flexibility to write what they want, but cool. Let's be a little vague about it. Time tracking hasn't been done correctly. How would you track it over 10,000 years? Of course it's going to fall apart. So, with things being so dire, and I just don't think that amount of direness is really communicated well. That should be like an overarching, omnipresent thing. Like, everybody has to step up. And this is why, quite frankly, before when we talked about the heated concept of female Space Marines, I'm like, the Primaris Project is the perfect opportunity for them to introduce female Space Marines, because they could say, well, this program works on the female biology, which has always been the reason it hasn't worked in the narrative for Space Marines. And because of that, why would you leave half of your population behind? You could make way more people if you could include females, right? Way more, Marines if you could include females. And, you look in modern day, some modern day countries, Israel in particular has had female people in their military the whole time, because it's a small country surrounded by enemies of the state. And so, that's what they've been forced to do. That's what the Imperium should be being forced to do at this point. Right.
The Cicatrix Maledictum being this terrifying, Vigilus, it was funny, like the bad cast guys made fun of, like, you can't look up. Right. And like again, it wasn't quite conveyed of, no, you can't look up because it will drive you insane. Like, seeing the sky ripped in half and then the immaterium beyond, like, you can't. That's why
the colors that aren't colors that don't match.
Like, that how bad things are. So yeah, it totally is the like, here's the switch to flip to go. Yeah. Okay, so Gilman gets to ask, hey, don't you think it's time you guys took a step out here and started getting some work done for us? And
I guess we should.
And they had pretty good motivation that Justin's going to talk about later. I don't want to. I almost jumped on your thing. Right.
So anyway, I think when you look at it in that context, I really like that they have updated things to this point. Previous to all of this, if you want a really, really in-depth look at the Custodes and all that, we cover them in our coverage of Inferno, which was the Horus Heresy book around Prospero Burns. And I think that's episode 152. So definitely worth getting like an even more in-depth look at the Custodes during the 30th, millennium. And is that right? 30 millennium? Yeah. And 10,000 years prior to now. But I do like how they have fit them into the lore pretty seamlessly. It
Yeah.
doesn't even feel shoehorned. It
And
feels
they're still
appropriate.
doing what they always did too, right? Because they always have at least 300 custodians in the emperor's palace,
Something
guarding
along
him.
those lines. Yeah.
But they're just being forced to go out and do their thing and be more proactive in fighting chaos. And it's cool to see.
So as we talked before, there's kind of your various flavors here of Custodes. Justin, let's start with yours.
There is a lot of cool flavors. I just had to go for
And again, this is done so that you can paint your guys in different ways.
Yeah.
You can, make it kind of your own force. And nothing is saying that you are limited to these in the book. Just like Space Marines, you could make your own.
I mean, lore-wise, Aramite, the gold is literally a golden material that, and even the models that are in the books painted black or different colors, like it's not painted. They literally, like at a cellular level, these artisans will shift the color of the Aramite.
That's pretty awesome.
It's very, very time consuming to do, but you can absolutely I think it's one of those armies you probably should have some gold in there somewhere.
I agree.
I
agree.
Kind of a trademark.
Kind of a trademark, but you don't have to.
You do a shoulder pad.
Yeah, the shoulder pad. So I went for the Dread Host. The Dread Host is pretty cool because back to what we're talking about of how these guys are going out and trying to be proactive and battling chaos. These guys are definitely that. They are comprised of many hundreds of custodians that they are all aboard these 3 ships that are called the Moriat. It's right here. And basically with these 3 massive pre-heresy vessels, they will often only have 1 go to a star system, maybe 2. If there's all 3 going, then that's a pretty big war going on. But these guys are all about not doing these subtle kind of, strike missions or behind the scenes. These things show up and they just wreak havoc, and they will just annihilate everything. Any part of the threat is just wiped out. The cities are burned and razed to the ground, and they're really out there just proving the wrath of the Emperor is a very real thing. So just an in your face. And I like the fact that they have the black worked into the shoulder guards, super cool.
Yeah.
Look awesome on the board. And just smash your face and prove how badass the Emperor is. That's what these guys are all about.
So they're the new school, as it were, of the the Gilman kind of request of no, let's go take the fight to them, and they're the face of that, as it were.
Absolutely, just super cool. And it's some Latin word, Moradis.
Oh, it's their 3 ships.
The 3 ships, yeah. And I just wonder what those ships look like. Those must be pretty impressive. No pictures, unfortunately.
Jody.
All right. So I mentioned before that I saw the Custodes kind of operating as emissaries. That was the first narrative beat that made sense to me. So I went with the faction or the internal group called the Emissaries Imperatus.
And by the way, I would have chosen this one.
This is what I swooped you on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I the Heralds of the Golden Throne.
It's awesome.
So what they do is they band together like-minded groups, and through discussion and meditation, they interpret what the Master of Mankind wishes them to do. They literally will form little groups and go, what is it that the Emperor wants us to do? And with tacit approval of the Captain General, they bear the Emperor's word across the Imperium to commanders who must hear them, or occasionally they'll unlock some ancient device from the palace vaults and bequeath it to whatever champion can best wield it. That's one of the things we haven't talked about much, is that the Imperial Palace is continent spanning.
It's massive.
Yeah,
It's massive.
Super cool.
So when Carl was saying you could design your own faction, there's vaults on top of vaults on top of vaults.
Yeah.
And it's wow, there's 10,000 of these Custodes. That's incredible. On an entire continent-sized palace, there's 10,000 of them if they were all there at once.
Think about how many people you can fit into a sports stadium.
Right.
Yeah. That's twice as many as there are Custodes.
I think the average attendance right now with the COVID restrictions on NFL games is 7,000 people is the big stadiums.
In a huge stadium.
Right. And when you look at it, you're
it's empty.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And then you're oh, that's not.
But I can hear a crowd, Jody. What's going on?
It's don't get me going. All right. So back to the fake future. So this is really though how I always imagined them to operate, is that they would be the mouthpiece of the Emperor. Now the little twist of them through discussion and meditation and communing on a spiritual level, for lack of
Did you see that? He just made a clicking sound. Oh,
yeah. Right. That they're just, because they're so mentally attuned and so heavily trained, that they assume that whatever this group determines is accurate, and then they send them out. And there's a quote. I'm going to do a little quote read. There's another great call out box here, and it's, what does it look like when like one of these emissary imperatives shows up? And in this case, it's to the Hammers of Dorn chapter to deliver Primarchs, because that was one of the things they rolled out, was that not all the chapters were like, you know, not everybody was the Crimson Fist where they're like, we're back in the game, baby. Like there were other chapters that were like, nah, we're good. We don't need these guys.
Yeah.
And so the emissaries were the ones showing up going, here's Primaris Marines. You will take them. No, so I just thought this was a great sum up of it. So this is Sinesh Galamaden.
Well, I think like had any other chapter shown up and said, hey, we've got these Primaris Marines would have been like, who are you to tell us what to do?
Right. Yeah. Because they all get along so well.
Yeah.
So the Ultramarines show up at everybody's door and they're like, hey, here's some Ultramarines.
They'd have been like, yeah, we don't care that you're Ultramarines.
We're good. Beat it. Yeah. That's not going to happen. So these guys show up. So here is a quote from one of them making the delivery. Through the artifice of the Martians' priesthood were these warriors created. By the grace of the Almighty Emperor are they given to you now. Silence your questions and instead rejoice at the honor done to you this day. You are handed a gift of hope in the by the immortal master of mankind himself, and you will accept it with sincere and solemn gratitude.
Love it.
Lest you be taken for traitors that you profess to hate.
Dude, that is so badass.
Again, the degree
that is of contempt.
the degree to which the Custodes just do not play. There
That is a
no
really
You
chill.
will take this firmware update and you will enjoy it.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
You will like it.
That is a
as
really
children,
well
we got that
written
one a lot.
piece right there.
Yeah.
Though.
That it's just this.
There's no argument.
Yeah.
Nope.
And you could almost silence your questions is yeah, okay, we're done now. Here, this is what you're doing. Oh, okay.
That's pretty amazing.
Just imagine a custodian doing the whole zip it.
Yeah. Is it
No, I can't help but read that a little bit in my,
www.zipit.com.
So for me to go
done?
back to my work, it's the teacher voice.
Yeah.
Is like, what's your question? No. All right. So back to what we're doing. It's the no. Okay.
Still
All
no.
right.
Well, I chose, since you stole mine, which I
they're
think
pretty
that's
cool.
really cool. And I think they're just uniquely situated to do that, right? They're perfect for that.
Right.
I chose the Shadow Keepers, mostly because the name sounded really cool.
Yeah.
And their color scheme.
And
I
they
almost,
do look-
this was my...
And their color scheme's
I almost
black.
picked them too.
But here's what's cool about the Shadow Keepers, okay? The Shadow Keepers, so as you just talked about, layers upon layers of things in the Imperial Palace. Deep beneath the Imperial Palace are these things called the Dark Cells, which sit, hundreds of corridors and levels below the palace, and they've sat there for thousands and thousands of years. And what the Dark Cells are is they are obulettes, which are deep beneath the Imperial Palace, and they contain entities and artifacts from the Old Night, which is also known as the Age of Strife. So that's when everything went to hell.
Yeah.
And these things are so powerful that if they were to break free, they would be like newly emerged threats into the galaxy. They could bring the Imperium down. These are very, very dangerous things that are kept kind of under lock and key. And the Adeptus Custodes, known as the Shadow Keepers, are the ones that know the rune locks and the wards and everything to make sure that these things stay exactly where they are. Now, what ended up happening during when the Great Rift opened is that several entities and artifacts were somehow released out of here and escaped. And they killed all the Shadow Keepers that were kind of left behind as they did this. And so now, and this is kind of one of the things I like about this is kind of Dark Angel-y in a way, where it's now the Shadow Keepers are out there basically trying to recover and re-imprison whatever these entities or artifacts are. I got to imagine some of them are probably artificial intelligences and those kinds of things. And so that's a freaking pretty cool... In my mind, that's a very cool mission. It's these things escaped. They slaughtered everybody. They're incredibly dangerous. Your job is to go return them. Totally in keeping with something that I really like. And the color scheme is pretty awesome.
Yeah, the black, they get the black armor, which is
awesome. Always a sign that you're really cool.
You must be awesome. That's why I like the Raiders.
And then we'll talk about notable battles, and we'll take a short break. Then we'll come back and talk about models and stuff. So I'll go first on this one. And I think probably one of the most notable battles, other than the battle, of course, for Terra itself, has to be the burning of Prospero. This is the first time we see them in action.
Out and about, yeah.
And we see it represented both in Black Library books and in Forge World books, where the battle for Prospero takes place. Russ shows up with the Space Wolves, but also with a contingent of Adeptus Custodes, as well as Sisters of Silence. Yeah. Because if you're going to fight a bunch of psychers, you want people that can stop the psychers.
You need some gnolls around.
And man, is this a battle to kind of end all battles.
Roughly how many custodians were
I don't remember the answer
several
to
hundred?
That, but there were quite a few. And when you read Prospero Burns, I think that's the one that deals with the actual fall of it. I think it's 1,000 Suns and Prospero Burns. Like, the damage that these guys do is incredible. And I mean, some of them are brought down, obviously. Like
sure.
the 1,000 Suns, are not to be trifled with, especially when there's 100,000 of them or something like that at the time. And the fight that takes place there is brutal and just street by street and just slaughter by slaughter, which ultimately ends in a situation that we all know that, Russ and Magnus face off, yada, yada. Magnus goes to Planet Sorcerers, et cetera, et cetera.
Et cetera, et cetera. All those small details.
Yada, yada, yada. So it's such a great story. Again, we cover it in episode 152. But if you have the opportunity to get Inferno, which is book 7 of the Horus Heresy series, the Black books, what a great read that is. Really, really impressive. Totally worth checking out. It is a fantastic story.
Nice.
Jody.
All right. Again, I went with one of the little call outs. Duty unto Death is the little name of it. So an Imperial flagship called the Terra Nostra is transporting Gene Tech under the protection of the Custodian Wardens. So it's attacked by a pair of roaming Tyranid hive ships.
I hate it when that happens.
It's darn it. So actually that was part of why I liked this story, is this is kind of a newer thing I feel like that GW's worked in, is that there's just these random Tyranid ships that have like splintered off and are just floating around making life horrible. Anyway, the Terra Nostra is overwhelmed by these ships, and the Custodian Wardens emergency teleport down onto the death world of Lock 2. The Wardens are pursued by the Tyranids, and then straight up like 300 style, they take the high ground that's a volcanic high ground, and they funnel the Tyranid forces up this steep slope past all this lava, and they just make a stand of it to protect this Gene Tech. The short story ends, or the short little excerpt ends with a month later, the Marines Malevolent arrive, and they orbital blast the Tyranid ships out from orbit, and they clear it off, and then they make planetfall to find out what's going on, and they find a single custodian who is badly beaten, battered, and barely alive, guarding the Gene Tech payload amidst, quote, a fortress of heaped Tyranid corpses.
It's pretty awesome.
Half his head missing.
The other really cool thing about this is you have custodians versus something other than chaos.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which is really, really interesting.
And I loved that also there's some little, if you're paying kind of close attention, there's some call outs in this to like other fiction elements, which is so old school GW that it's the Terra Nostra, which to me was a little bit Nostromo-y, that we're fighting aliens. And then there's the 300 thing where like they have to do this like this very narrow
if
channeling.
Any force was ever like 300,
yeah,
it would be these
That's
dudes.
these guys.
Absolutely.
Even though if you've read Brothers of the Snake by Dan Abnett, it deals with the Iron Snakes, where like there's literally, it feels like you're reading 300. and Abnett himself, after he wrote it and then 300 came out, he was like, oh no. This is very close.
I guess I was inspired. Anyway, speaking of being inspired, I liked this one. I thought it was
that
cool.
Is a great
that
story.
Noble last stand against the the faceless Tyranids, and
always cool when you're the lone survivor that's just slaughtered.
There it is. We found our Ripley, so there we go.
Now,
Justin? You said that you thought Prospero Burns was like the story other than the Siege of Terror. I actually think Justin's is. Like,
Okay.
I think this is incredibly important to the current timeline.
Let's hear it.
It is. So obviously the Cicatrix Maledictum happens. The skies are ripped asunder. And Khorne decides to go for like a decapitating strike.
This is an important part. And it's
Imperial
something that
Palace,
gets
yeah.
overlooked often,
Yeah.
as I just did.
I don't know. Has there been any novels that have gotten more in detail on this? Because it'd be really fascinating to read about
It is
this.
covered in, yes, it is covered in an A novel. I have to think about it. Anyway, go on with the story.
So shortly after Rabute Guilliman gets back to Terra, Terra itself is actually assaulted by Khorne, who again tries to go for this decapitating strike. And the custodians enact their catastrophe protocols. So I don't imagine them all running around like, what do we do? But
We've never planned for this.
apparently through the blood games, they've probably practiced for a moment such as this. And 8 bloodthirsters were summoned, and it's
which is important because this is the first recorded
other than
the Siege of Terra,
of
demons appearing on Terra.
right.
Yeah, it's a direct assault.
Yeah.
A direct assault at the gate, and thankfully, the Ultramarines are there, the custodians are obviously there, as are the Sisters of Silence, and they all just storm out of the gates. They explain them like just blasting massive holes out of all the demon hordes with all their orbital guns that are around, and just mayhem and bloodshed everywhere. Yeah, high losses on all sides, but the forces of the Imperium end up being victorious. Of course, the story didn't obviously end with the Emperor being decapitated, even though that's what Khorne wanted. And after this, Valoris and Guilliman.
Do you think that skull would be at the top of the pile of skulls?
I would think so.
Yeah,
I think he'd probably make a nice necklace out of
Maybe.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe an earring. But after this, Valoris and Guilliman have to really kind of reevaluate things and say, hey, man, we need to obviously have better defenses here on Terra, but also be more, again, proactive into going out.
Because if Terra itself could be attacked.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that was a big kind of turning point.
So that's a good point, Justin.
The lions have been unleashed.
Yeah, and the fact that, this is an important, as far as the Custodes go, this is an important moment for them. More important than I would say Prospero. Yeah, for sure.
Well,
because it
puts them in
changes
the
the
game.
direction
Yeah.
of the force, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting.
It gets them out on your tabletop. Without this, I'm like, I'd still feel like, why are these guys on tabletops?
Right.
I don't are we playing near Earth all the time? Or
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
So because of the Battle Lions Gate, like it becomes, like you said, we unleash the lions.
And what a cool narrative game that would be to play, huh?
Oh my God.
I got
Make
some
a big
darn
wall
demons.
of terrain, and then have the just a massive cornate demon horde.
That would be an awesome, huge apocalypse game. If, like at an event where you had like 8 bloodthirsters.
Oh, heck yeah, it would be.
That would be pretty awesome.
Rabute out there, Valor. I mean,
Oh yeah, you'd have
awesome.
them all. That would be amazing.
It'd be easy to replicate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Dear Forge
It would
World
be it would be expensive.
display in
yeah.
Nottingham. Would be.
It'd be expensive to replicate, but it would be easy to replicate with the models that are currently available.
Sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Access to the models is there now.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do this. We're going to take a short break. Then we're going to come back and continue our coverage of the Talons of the Emperor.
Sounds good.
Hey guys, I'm Caleb,
And this is Kat.
and we are CK Studios. We want to invite you and your friends to come paint with us at one of our exciting and fun-filled airbrush and hobby weekenders. Our weekend workshops are 2 days of intense hands-on training, working directly with and learning from some of the top gaming artists in the industry.
Whether you're brand new to miniature painting or an experienced veteran that wants to up your game, CK Studios has the workshop for you. Our workshops cover everything from learning the basics and building confidence in airbrushing, all the way up to creating that centerpiece model for your army or display case.
For more class info and our upcoming schedule, you can find us on Facebook at CK Studios Come Paint With Us, or register directly at ckstudios.bigcartel.com.
If you can't find a class near you, that's okay. Just contact us and we'll bring a workshop to you.
All right. Welcome back. And we are going to continue our discussion of Talons of the Emperor, our show Force episode. We hope you're enjoying it so far. But let's get into the models a little bit, because this is an interesting model range. As normally when we do these show Force episodes, like there's a huge model range to pick from. Here it's fairly limited, but it's amplified by the amount of Forge World material you can pull from. And in particular, now that the Forge World, it's over there on your table. Yep. The Forge World, what's it called?
The compendium.
The Forge World Compendium is coming out. This makes all of these very handy and playable. By the way, if I could just throw a plug in there, that book is awesome.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is awesome.
That book is awesome.
Even though I can't take a Terex drill, but it's still awesome.
It is. I mean, look, I haven't looked at every rule and compared it. I'm not that guy, but that is a handy book to have.
Yeah.
All the things in one place is a really nice.
And it's well laid
way to
out.
go.
It's very clear. It's super easy to reference. That is a great book right there. Super worth your $1. If
I will be
you're
dusting off so many models and getting them finished.
I need to look at the Shadow Specters for.
They're good.
Nice.
They're really good.
Nice.
As is my Lynx, my Hornets.
Oh,
all my-
links are back. All right.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
but we're not
back to this.
talking about Eldar. We're talking about, Aldari. We're talking
Oh,
about,
I will plug the Splinter Mind podcast, though, for all you Eldar players out
Yeah,
there.
you
They
should
just
really-
did an episode talking about this book,
Yep.
and I hate them for that because I'm going to be digging.
specific to the Aldari components of it in Drukhari.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go through this kind of round robin style. We've each picked 2 of our favorite models from the available line, both in plastics and the Forge World models. And we'll kind of talk about why that model. I mean, this is kind of really a taste thing. It's mostly an aesthetic thing, but I'll go first. And I want to talk about the Legio Custodes Contemptor Galatis Dreadnought from Forge World.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Just freaking whoa. The only Dreadnought I probably like more than this guy is probably the one for the Minotaurs, the named Contemptor Dreadnought for the Minotaurs. This is an incredible looking model. When painted really well, it just really pops. And I love the weapon options on him. I think it is just it's everything that I like about Custodes translated into a Dreadnought. And
Bigger
the
and
fascinating
badder,
thing
yeah.
to me about Custodes Dreadnoughts is that even when a Custodes is dead, he's not dead. He's put in a Dreadnought. And these things are brutal. And this is actually the model that this is the first model I was like, as I bought my Custodes force, I was like, and let me go buy one of these from Forge World. And then I was like, oh, it's sold out.
Yeah.
Oh, they're all sold. Everything's sold out. I'm like,
there
okay.
isn't much available.
There is now. It's all back now.
Oh, there you go.
And so this is a very dangerous time for this show to be dropping.
Did you just check on the break or what?
Oh no! It like 2 weeks ago, everything became available all of a sudden, and so I looked at this, and now I need to see in the compendium there what his rules look like to see if it makes sense. Because again, I don't want to build this huge force.
Right.
I just want to build a force that I'm going to kind of go out there and play.
And
with.
this is the Contemptor with the giant Gladius style sword,
Yes.
or storm
Shield.
shield.
Yes.
Yeah, just a really,
And I
is a
just
really cool
love it.
model.
It looks too like the pictures from the Forge World site. Like it is super like that. It's got that Contemptor superposability that you could literally like the ball socket joint, so you can kind of do whatever you want with
I mean
him.
the Forge World Contemptor Dreadnought is such a step above that plastic dread that you get from. Well, I think it came in the Talons of the Emperor
the one
box,
from-
but it also came in the Horus Heresy box set.
Yeah, it was- Which one was that?
Cadia? No,
It was the Word Bearers Ultramarine one.
Yeah. So it was so not Cadia. What was the planet they saw? Jesus, I'm getting old. I'm losing.
We'll come
my-
back. I'm brain farting too. I'm hungry. But
Calth.
Calth, there, that's
Trail of
the
Calth.
one.
Jeez.
That was gonna. Yeah.
I knew it started with a C.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean that model is definitely like it's not the best. You have to convert it. You have to chop limbs up. It's a good model. I mean, obviously that's the model we do a lot of the CK classes with. It's a good palette to kind of learn on, but
Yeah, but it's also
Good
kind
canvas.
of such a disappointment because it could have been so great.
could have been. Yeah,
As
could have
a-
been a contender.
Yeah, as a plastic. And I think if they were going to redo it now, they may have made some different choices. So,
The good news is there's about 50 to choose from Forge World.
this is true.
No shortage.
No shortage.
This is true. So I love this model. It's everything I like about what is his name? Arcturus, the Minotaurs one.
Yeah.
Kind of the same concept. So I think that's why it translates over for me well. So this is on my must buy list.
Yeah, understandably, I think it's pretty iconic. Translation of the general aesthetic elements of what the Custodes look like into a dreadnought form, and it's such an, I don't know what it is. There's like a more natural bridge between Custodes and like their general line troops as opposed, and then these like dreadnoughts. Like it doesn't feel like such a step away.
No.
Like it always with Marines, it's like, oh, there's that big robot.
Yeah.
Like these, it's no, that's just a different version of, like, I don't know. They feel very connected. It feels very close. It's
agreed.
Aesthetically really cool.
Agreed.
I think my only critique of this model would be that, like, I mean, it's phenomenal, but like it is very like bottom heavy, you know, like it almost feels like it really needs to have
the shin guards.
Yeah, like your eyes go right to those shin guards almost. I would really love to see
You know
like
why
a
the shin
back
guards?
banner
You know why the
on
shin
it.
guards are that big?
Look good.
There's a reason.
Why the shin guards are that big?
Yeah.
So-
It's because they've done so much ass kicking.
right.
The lower leg is so
Yeah.
big. It has to protect
They
the
don't skip
shins.
ass kicking leg day. I mean, fantastic model, but dude, just imagine that model if you were to put like a banner, like a back banner, or even like a pole. It doesn't have to be a flag, but just to give it some height.
Oh, it'd be sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
What did you pick, Jody?
I'm going to go with I picked one Forge World unit and one, GW main unit. I'm going to go with my Forge World unit first. And I went with the Legio Custodes Venatari. These are the kind of jump troops with the winged, gilded,
Super
golden
cool.
backpacks. For me, this is, again, purely aesthetic choice. Although I think it seems like in play, they'd fulfill a really nice role. But maybe get usurped by one of the other units we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
But what I love about them is they're this beautiful blend of like 70s pulp sci-fi.
Totally.
Yeah.
And still totally grimdark. Like
I think there were a lot of jokes about the winged Hawkmen in Flash Gordon. When
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
came out, right?
Yeah, they
Yep.
do have that vibe.
But I think it's somewhat intentional.
Yeah, and it's successful. Like,
Yeah.
again, they're this callback to this archaeotech or this ancient tech kind of that exists on Terra and nowhere else. So they have this kind of dated look, but they're just super dynamic.
Fits.
And the little details of the leather gloves and the leather, like, kind of like boot coverings that they have. And,
The chaps.
yeah. Not quite, but yeah, sure. But yeah, they're just, and then you can equip them either with pistols or they have the halberd option. The halberd option for me is the like, oh man, that just looks so cool. These winged
is
guys
cool.
with these halberds.
Yeah. I agree with
swooping
you
down.
100%. I think it's I really like
And
it.
admittedly, like if you're like, oh, I think they look dopey, I can see where that kind of nod to the pulp sci-fi
Maybe doesn't
70s
resonate with you?
doesn't resonate with some people. And usually that's not an aesthetic I like, but for some reason on these guys, it just feels so at home.
But you know what's
and
interesting?
then it's the winged back. Like,
You know what's interesting? When Alan Bly was talking about the Adeptus Mechanicus, before they were Adeptus Mechanicus, the Mechanicum, he was very much in love with the idea of them having kind of throwback weaponry like that, like kind of a nod to like Flash Gordon stuff with like lightning guns and like stuff like that. So it doesn't surprise me that this carried over here as well. But that was like something that he was very much in love with those kinds of things. Like I think his favorite movie was Forbidden Planet, right? And if you look at the technology in Forbidden Planet, like that's the kind of stuff you see in the AdMech stuff, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and there's a definite nod with these guys. So there's a purely aesthetic choice. They were a 30K exclusive unit, but they're available now in the compendium. You can grab them and throw them in your 40K force. And man, they just, I don't know. They look really cool. And I like the gilded wing of like angelic wings, but they're still like really heavy looking.
Yeah.
That's the kind of juxtaposition that I think is neat. Like it's a flight pack, but it looks like heavy.
I gotcha.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Justin, what did you go with?
Speaking of aesthetics, I had to pick the Telamon Dreadnought.
Yeah.
As much as I hate playing against this thing and have for years, every time I do play against it, I'm always astounded by the work that Robert did on it, on his model, and it's just so cool. Like, and unlike the Contemptor, this model's definitely got the
balance of
a little more balance, right?
the
massive
shoulder pads
shoulders.
outweigh the ass kicking shin guards.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. This guy doesn't skip shoulder day.
But I got to tell you, I'm not a fan.
Really?
No, this is the one model I'm not a fan of.
What do you
and it's
not
because
like
I'm
about him?
also not a fan of the like Saturnine Terminator armor where the head is like reduced into the shoulder thing. And this kind of feels like that.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I mean, like I see what you say. And actually now that I look at the Contemptor with your eye, as you were talking about the shins and joking about the ass kicking thing, I do see the balance that you're talking about here in this model. I've seen it on the table. It's cool. It's cool. I'm not as big a fan of it for some reason. But now that you've kind of pointed my eye to the balance, now I can't unsee it. So I'm like, oh
man, that rocket pack in the back between the giant shoulder blades
is pretty cool.
Oh man,
And I actually had one of my students brought one.
They're out of stock again.
Snooze, you lose, man.
Just solved my problem.
That's what you get for recording a podcast. I mean, one of my students, he had one of these in class, and he was painting it up, and just, oh my God, just the swoops of the armor. And I mean, it almost feels Eldari in a way of just the movement, you know, because usually the Imperial stuff is very like boxy.
Yeah.
And this stuff is just, which I think is something that they definitely consciously did with the Custodians. Like their armor is very different looking from, they still have the big shoulder pads and the marine look, but their legs are the more elegant kind of swooping lines and stuff. And they've carried that through.
Of this stuff is out of stock again. I should have bought it.
You got to call your people, man. Say, yo.
I don't have people there anymore. They all left or do other things with the company now. Dang it.
All right, second pick, Carl. What you got?
Well, you know. Now I'm kind of bummed.
Oh, man.
My second pick is
maybe you should focus on your sisters.
Yeah, probably. It's, you know what?
I am the voice of reason.
You're not wrong. The Alaris Custodians in their Alaris Custodian Terminator armor. I love these guys with the axe. These are on the Games Workshop site, not the Forge World site. These are the guys that are sent in when they have a nut that needs cracking, right? Like when it's a difficult...
and they do crack nuts.
Whether it's a shipboarding break or you know, breaking through something that some kind of fortress that has been an impediment. These are the guys, or impediment, I should say. These are the guys that they send in to do it in their Alaris Terminator armor. I think they look fantastic, and I absolutely love the axes that they come with, the power axes that you can equip them with. I think they just look so freaking awesome.
They're so brutal in game too.
Yeah.
Those axes are like, they have like 4 attacks each. Those axes are +3 strength, like -2 for flat 3 damage or something ridiculous.
Yeah, put it down.
And when you drop them down, you can, I think the stratagem is like unleash the lions or something. You can drop them down and it's 2 or 3 command points and they can split up and all act as single units.
And crazy.
And you can bring them down and for more command points, they can set up within 6 inches instead of 9.
And I think this is
deep strike.
I think this is an important thing as we talk about rules with these guys, because these guys, because they're so elite, Justin, you just started hitting on it. It's like, oh, what I like about them is they have this and it's this strong and it's this. And then they can come down. And then they can do this. And by the way, they get this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of with this stratagem they do, and it's just like,
and I mean, they're expensive, but you just shoot them down. Do not get into close combat with them.
Well, what's interesting about them is when I first started getting into 40K, and again, I was doing this with my initial Chaos army, and you can really do this with Tyranids. You put all kinds of biomorphs on a Tyranid, and all of a sudden that Tyranid is super expensive, and people are like, you don't want to do that. You're overloading that.
Yeah.
Whereas these guys, they survive and they have the ability to be overloaded with stuff because they're durable.
They are brutal.
Anyway, let's go to Jody. What's your second choice, Jody?
So from GW Direct, I actually went with Captain General Trajan Valoris.
Oh, yeah, you did.
That model.
So good.
Dude, like, so as amazing as these guys are supposed to be, to put out a named character for the unit that matches this amazing is a tall order. Like that's a lot to ask of a model.
Because sometimes you read the lore behind a character and then you see the model and you're like, not so much anymore nowadays, but they nailed it, dude.
This guy's fantastic. He is so regal. He has this incredible commanding presence. I think one of the details I really love is one, he's got this lion motif that's dropped on him here and there, I think is beautiful. But then also he's got his left hand is like sweeping his cape, which wraps around and bolts onto his shoulder pads. His left hand is kind of very subtly sweeping it away. And he, this is one of those examples, I think, and the discussion has come up a number of times about the Forge World Primarchs. And I often prefer the ones that aren't in combat poses.
Yeah.
Because it's a less is more. It's a commanding presence thing. It's harder to do because, if the guy is in a dynamic pose swinging his hammer, Ferris, looks fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you're able to get that kind of fixed pose in like the person just has a presence. It's not
They're commanding the thing around them.
And this model absolutely has this. Has the very sneaky like golden halo built in. You know, the bird feathers are a strange choice.
What's interesting about that is I get like this old fantasy Imperium or not Imperium,
like Empire
almost.
Almost.
Vibe from those.
Right. You know, and I think it's that very rare, like organic element that he has that sets him apart from everything else. Like, why doesn't he just look like a Custodes with a beard? You know, but he looks commanding in a weird way. That feather swoop kind of adds to that. So it's all these little elements, and then he's got that actual lion pelt on his shoulder. So all those little elements work together for just this very, very
You mentioned
strong model.
the kind of left hand pulling the cloak aside, and it really is. It's not just like appears to be like no, it's grabbing the cloak and pushing it to the side. It's the details on this model
amazing.
are incredible.
So it's in a weird way, there's the flow of the robes and the way his hand's moving. You get some dynamism and some movement visually in the model without him, being up on a hero rock or anything. He's just there and taking up.
I would totally put that model on a hero rock.
He's one of those that deserves it. He doesn't need it. He just
Doesn't
can
need it.
handle it. All right, Justin, close us out here on pretty models.
Man, I'm a sucker for jet bikes, so I had to pick the Dawn Eagle.
Yep.
These models are just so impressive in person too. I mean, their spears are like 4 inches tall. I mean, it is like the most brutal looking spear you've ever seen in your life, and just the entire miniature is so well sculpted and so full of detail and movement, and they are just phenomenal.
I love the intake for, I don't know what it is about like the lines of the bike itself, but I like the intake on the front of the bike. It makes it feel a little more visceral to me.
They are just beefy and elegant at the same time. And if I played Custodians, I would have like 12 of them.
Faux show.
Ordering 4-packs.
More on those later.
It also helps that in game they are so good, and they're so fast and so deadly.
5-packs.
I'm telling you, man, at least 6. No less than 6.
Justin said I had to.
Oh, they're so good.
All right. Look, I mean, it is a small model range. I'm not going to say it isn't. It doesn't really need to be much bigger, but when you factor in some of the awesome grav tanks and things that they get, I think their grav tanks are some of the coolest looking models in the game.
I was surprised none of us picked it, honestly.
I kind of felt like it was like almost too easy, so I wanted to really focus on, because I am in love with some of the grav tanks that they have.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, Colin had one of the most beautiful,
It was a gorgeous armor.
the most beautiful Custodes armies I'd ever seen.
I don't remember seeing his Custodians.
Oh God,
That
it
was
was
killer.
so good. And he had, all the Forge World decals on the tanks, and that was actually what he used to show me how to put decals on. And that was a huge decal to put on that thing. And I saw it land on there and I was like, oh my God, this looks so good. And when he sold that army, like I kind of just wasn't in the market at the time for an army. I really regret not buying that army.
It was
Especially
really, really
after
beautiful.
reading all this.
And now.
And I told him while we were studying for this, I was like, I'm really bummed you've already sold that army. So, because if it were today, I would own Colin's Custodes army.
Oh, yes,
So
it would be mine.
It would be mine.
That Caladius tank is no joke.
So now that
good.
we've talked about models, let's talk about our favorite units in the army. And this can also just be another fanboy moment for a model, or this can be, this thing seems to perform very well. And Justin, let's go you first this time. And again, we've each chosen 2, and we can just kind of work our way around.
If I can get through my PTSD and get to this.
Now, the reason you say that is you've been playing your good buddy Bob.
My good buddy Bob. Yeah, I've fought against his Custodians
Quite a bit now.
many times, and I have not played them in 9th yet. So it was always like the soup army. He'd have the knight in the back or 2, and then he'd have the Custodians up front. Actually, I say that. Maybe I think we actually have played a game. But now they have so much more teeth. They have so many more command points to play with 9th edition. But that being said, the shield captain on a bike, if you've ever played against one of these, oh my God. Because there's just certain combinations of stratagems and relics that you can give him. And this guy, I mean, he's sitting on a 2-up armor save with a 3-up invulnerable save.
Yep. I think almost all of them are, right?
A 5-up shrug, you know. He can reroll charges. You could burn a couple command points to give the master of the blood games or whatever on him, and he's getting a free reroll every time. I mean, he just murders face and does not die. I mean, I think I've only managed to take him out a couple times, and I did a happy dance when I did. I mean, you have to really just smite him off his horse, you know. But even then, he's got that 5-up invulnerable save. And even if you do kill him, he can burn command points and attack again in death, you know, and kill whatever killed him. It's just, and he's so fast. It's just you can't even avoid him. You know, he's on you like turn 2.
Yeah.
It's a lot of ands.
Yeah, yeah, he is just brutal. So Custodians, I would never not take one of those guys.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yep.
Jody, let's go to you.
I'm going to start where I always like to start any army. So tell me about the troops. I'm gonna go with the Custodian Guard.
They're okay.
They're all right, you know. So what I put down though is like the famous early 2000s movie Marine article that Games Workshop put out, which was like, what would it look like if Marines played on tabletop?
How they're written.
How they're written.
That was funny.
They would look a lot like Custodes is the answer. You know, so this is pretty close. We got a ballistic skill and a weapon skill and a save of a 2+. Also, they're built in 5-up.
4-up if you're Battleforged.
4-up if you're Battleforged, which frankly you're going to be now. Their strength and toughness 5, so that's respectable. Their attacks and wounds of 3. Like, so even with the Marine upgrade of you get 2 wounds, they're still like, that's cute. Keep going. You know, that's an impressive stat line. And then you give them their default Guardian Spear.
Yep.
So now they're strength +1 in combat, strength 6 in combat, -3 to the AP, and D3 damage. I mean,
they're brutal.
And this is your troop.
It's your troop.
This is your freaking troops putting this out. You know, and then they also have the ability once they're battle forged, that their sworn guardian ability, that they control objectives. How do I word this? That they trump. They always control the objective.
OBSEC.
Yeah, but it's not just that. It says regardless of number. Like even if they're outnumbered, they still have it. So if your opponent, and I might be totally reading this wrong, but the way I read it is it's not just objective secured, but it's if they're outnumbered and they still claim.
Yeah.
So these guys with objective secured.
And I think they have to have that because there's so few of them.
Right. So these guys, you know, your Custodian Guard troops, if there's one of them there surrounded by 30 orcs, he's a troop. He wins. There's one of him to one of your troops. It doesn't matter. You know, now if it gets away from troop to troop, then OBSEC becomes its own thing.
Yeah.
But that on a troop unit, that ability to be outnumbered and you still go, no, the objective's mine. No, the objective's mine. You're going to have to get rid of me. My gosh. I mean, other than being expensive, which they should be, and they don't shoot great. Admittedly, the bolter that's on the Guardian Spear is
2 damage though.
It's 2 damage. It's respectable, you know. It's the one thing they don't do that's like, you know, it's not a strength 7 gun with like 5 shots or anything like that.
So they do have the same OBSEC rule. They probably have a stratagem they can burn where like,
okay,
but it's the same objective secured where, you know,
version
it's
there.
still good.
There is somewhere that it mentions
Probably a strat or something.
Since we're not the most skilled at that. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, I mean, point being, for a troop that's supposed to be hyper elite, box has been checked. These guys get it done, you know, and they're not too shabby looking on top of that.
No.
You know, that this isn't one of those armies where it's like, oh, let me pay my troop tax so I can take some. Yeah. No unit in the game is going like, oh, I'll just go charge into a Custodian Guard troop unit and I'll be fine.
You are all Justin will probably tell you, like charging a Custodian unit, you're always like, okay,
It's
how much
bloody.
am I bringing to bear against this thing?
A full strength unit. I mean, even 3 of them. I mean, there's been times where I fired like my entire Dark Eldar army at 3 Custodians. Now, to be fair, this was with the old like wound allocation rules with those damn storm shields.
Right.
And I would maybe kill 3 of them, and that was like my entire army shooting. You know, and then his turn and all his tanks are blowing me apart, and it's just brutal.
Right. I didn't even get into that. You can optionally give these guys all storm shields and then further up their invul saves. And like, come on.
And then you always make sure you have them next to your Vexillus Praetor with a banner of a bubble of -1 to hit, which doesn't sound like much. It is.
No, everybody lost their mind about the changeling when he had that, and they're like,
huge.
these guys just have it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's such a great troop unit. And I think the reason I picked them, though, really at the core was they're supposed to be hyper elite, and they are.
Yeah.
Your basic troop is like, wow, a lot of other armies' best units don't have a stat line like that. They don't have damage output like that. They're just not there.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So look, the first one I chose was Shield Captain in Alaris Terminator plate armor. So I just talked about the Alaris Terminators before, or the Custodian Alaris Custodians.
Yep.
First off, I love Terminators in general. I love the Alaris Terminator plate armor. I think a Shield Captain is a solid leader for your army, and I think that this guy, he looks cool and he's powerful. He has 7 wounds on a 2+3+, just out of the starting gate, and they can just wipe out whatever they get in close contact with. Now, you talked about how the troops, like, this is an elite army. He is an elite leader. The thing I would say about that, and the thing you need to know about this army, though, is that once you begin to lose models, you're beginning to lose effectiveness real fast because they are so individually effective. And so it really only takes a handful of very bad rolls for your game to suddenly switch gears and go the other direction. But that's what command points are for.
Right.
Right. So,
well, like you said, force multiplier. I mean, that's always the deal.
Yeah.
If you are dealing with one of those units that's like exponentially better and better and better and better, well, when you lose them, the reverse is going to be true.
Yeah,
you're going to notice it.
The blast radius of losing one of these guys is pretty heavy.
Yeah, but they also, with the new Psychic Awakening, they got some really good stratagems. Like they have one, you ignore rend 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Seems good.
But again, a 1 on a die.
A 1 on a die, yeah.
It's a 1 on a die.
Yeah.
But not having to deal with 2s and 3s seems good too.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is very true. So yeah, that was kind of my first pick. I want to get into my second pick though, which is the Caladius Grav tank, because we were just talking about tanks before.
The Caladius is bad at.
Is that it? Caladius?
Caladius, yeah.
Caladius?
We have Caladius assassins.
Yeah, it must be Caladius.
I'm pretty sure it's Caladius.
Is it Custodes or Custodes?
It is now. It is Custodes. It is Custodes. I have confirmed that. 412 power level. Oof. But by the way, that's about 225 points in
Worth
a points
it.
game. You get a hover tank with a 3+, 5+. So it has a 5-up invuln.
Did it remain ballistic skill 2?
Its BS is 2+ until it starts taking wounds.
Sure.
Right. So, but 14 wounds on the thing. Yep. So it's a flying land raider.
And it's got an invul.
It's the 5+ invuln. So it's a flying land raider effectively.
Yep.
Well, except for the doesn't carry anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. But 14
only
wounds,
the one guy that's blowing everything apart.
moves 14 it until it starts taking wounds as it degrades up until it loses its first 6 wounds. It's still moving at 14 BS 2+. That degrades to a 3+ and then finally to a 4+.
Toughness 8, yeah.
Toughness 7. At 3 attacks. Who cares about attacks? Those are just
the
close
guns.
combat. But
Tell us about the guns.
So, what you really, I think, want on this is the twin Arachnus heavy blaze cannon. So you have 2 kind of options with this weapon. You have a beam and burst option, and the beam 48-inch range, strength 9, AP -4, heavy 2, D3 +3. But each time this attack is, each time you use that profile, the beam profile, if your target is a vehicle unit, you re-roll the wound roll. So that's the
What was the strength on it again?
9.
9.
AP -4.
Yeah.
So effectively kind of like a las cannon, but re-rolling wounds, but you're not going to ever roll a 1.
And you're probably going to have that
because you're rolling a D3.
You're probably going to have that next to one of your captains that's allowing you until the book gets fixed. New book comes out. You're going to be re-rolling ones to hit, ones to wound.
Yep. Then it has a burst option, which is heavy 8, strength 7, AP -2, damage 1. So there's your anti-infantry killer.
Or Dark Eldar vehicle killer.
Or Dark Eldar vehicles. Heavy vehicles, you're going to use the beam. Everything else, you'd probably use this.
Yeah, it's just a good profile.
Yeah, not too shabby at all. But being a D3 +3 wounds because there is nothing more depressing than
rolling that one.
rolling a 1 when you're.
Yeah, I like how they're doing
last
that
unit.
with 9th edition, having a little more fixed damage in there, more reliability.
So it's the flare shielding that it has is what gives it the 5+ invuln, and of course the vehicle explodes in the event that it takes damage, blah blah blah, and causes mortal wounds when it explodes.
But you're also going to have this guy next to that banner for -1 to be shot, because that's cool.
Yep. Overall, and to top all that off,
Your Iron Warriors got this, Jody. They got this.
Yeah, I'm feeling good. Wait.
and to top all this off, it is freaking awesome looking.
It is fantastic looking.
Yeah. It is just the dual kind of front, like, I don't even know what you would call those.
Yeah, the kind of
Fairings.
Yeah.
Fairings, I guess. I mean, it is a sick looking model.
kind of has almost that Eldari kind of feel, like the Falcon, how it has the two wings up front. It's very
I remember when the
elegant and-
Sakaran battle tank came out for 30K, and I was like, this thing is awesome. Like, it looks so cool. And then this came out, and I was like, oh, come on. This is a great
me as the
model.
Eldari player, like, what's with all these Imperial units treading on our grass, man? We're supposed to be the grav tank guys. What's going on here?
All right, let's go back to you, Justin, then we'll go to Jody.
Sticking with a theme, man. I've just played against those Dawn Eagle bikes so many times.
Yeah.
And they are just murderous. You have to deal with them. You have to deal with them quickly. You never can deal with them quickly enough.
And they are quick.
They're quick. They've got a ton of firepower. You can arm them a couple different ways. I know Robert's tried the missile launchers on them before. I feel like he got better success with just the sheer amount of shots that they get. Because if they're within rapid fire range, they're pumping out 12 shots apiece. It's just murderous.
Which they're easily going to be if you so choose.
Yes. Yep. So they just, and with that volume of shots, even if you're firing at like a light vehicle or something, you're gonna get damaged through. So tons of firepower. When they hit you, it's just like a freight truck, because they're re-rolling.
You mean when
wounds.
they're assaulting?
Well, yeah, when they charge, they re-roll all failed wounds with their spears.
Oh my gosh.
They also have a stratagem they can burn.
How many attacks are they pulling each?
Like 4 or 5.
4 each,
man.
and then that attack strength 6. So you're hitting on 2s, re-rolling to wound on, foreseeably at worst a 3
Probably
up,
a 3 up. Yeah. Unless you're charging a vehicle with a strength of 7.
And the weapons are
4 up,
neg 3 for D3. So, and these guys are always buffed up by their captain on the bike. So they're re-rolling 1s to hit, 1s to wound. Well, obviously the 1s to wound on the charge, and then they have this stratagem they can burn too, where you can kind of interrupt your opponent for a couple command points.
I remember talking to you and Bob about that.
The stooping dive. So you can be like, oh, you charged that unit. Okay, I'm within 7 inches of you. I'm going to burn a couple command points, and then they interrupt and charge in and attack first.
Interrupting your charge.
Your charge.
Jeez.
So they are just murderous. I mean, you tend to see most Custodes players have, at least 2 units in their army.
Yeah. I know Todd does from Table War. Has several of them.
I was going to say, it's pretty much his whole army.
It's pretty much a whole bike army. Yeah.
They're just that good. And they offer, so much mobility. In 9th edition, it's all about capturing objectives. And these guys can just put pressure on your enemy's backfield and just cause all kinds of havoc. So,
and on those small tables, turn charge 1.
Charge 1.
Right. Well, and even if they don't, they have the default, they move 6. If for some reason they have to advance, I can't imagine they would be, but they just
move.
it's a 6.
It's
Their
a 6.
advance
They
roll's a
don't
6.
roll.
No.
They just take a 6.
Yep. They move 20 then. So.
Yep. And like I said,
Great.
both weapon options are good. I mean, they're Melta missile and flak burst missiles.
Yeah.
Those are both really good too. Just very flexible on how you can
I think
equip them.
you see a theme with every unit here where they're just like loaded to the gills with options of firepower and strength in combat. And that's just how this entire army works.
Yeah. Right. I would probably take one of each. I would do one with the bolters and then one with the missiles.
I think this was.
I'm taking some notes. Hang on.
This was definitely going to be one of my choices as well.
Kits, one with bolters. Got it. Okay.
And the kind of little note I had for myself is I've often said I don't like bikes, motorcycle style bikes in 40K. It's just conceptually it's arbitrarily the bridge too far in my narrative, right? It just something
it's
about
the
a bridge.
direct relation to Judge Dredd that brought it in.
For you?
No, I'm saying I think that's why they're in the game.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, especially with the new bikes too.
When you
But-
look at how they look.
But I'm
for
with
sure.
you. Like they kind of ride up and then stop and
these bikes, admittedly being Jack bikes, but these work the way bikes
For you,
should
yeah.
work, like where they're blowing by things, and the firepower is not necessarily a thing I was expecting, but that ability to run up with this shock assault and okay, that's how it should feel. But they're
I've always
phenomenal.
felt rules for bikes should be more like a hit and run type of thing, where it's like they pass by you and then they're hitting the opponent. Like I don't like, and that's why I laugh about the like they ride up, stop, and then start swinging their chainsaws.
And they're stuck.
It's like, but at least in 40K now, you're not stuck in close combat. You ride up, you attack, you move on. So you can kind of conceptually say they're riding by.
Right. Yeah, that helps.
And it works a little bit.
But
for me.
these all day, every day.
These all fit.
Yeah, like yep, they feel that way. So we've mentioned a bunch of times. I'm going to do mine here.
Yeah.
That we've talked about like this army is within itself a force multiplier. So I'm going to go with Justin. You've mentioned it a number of times. The Vexillus Praetor, which is the standard bearer. It is the unit that carries the Custodes Vexilla, which is their icons that create these incredibly effective bubbles. So you take this elite army and then you apply these rules. So once you take one, the standard, the Vexilla,
You're going to give it the neg one.
right. Well,
You
get
have
three
options.
Right. You could add one to the attack's characteristics for units within 6 inches, friendly units, of course, within 6 inches.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't suck.
No.
Like these guys put it down in close combat. So, but they already,
Because they're already murdering basically whatever they're touching.
right. They're already, I can't imagine the scenario where they're like, gosh, if we'd just been able to hit a little harder. They do that just fine. The second one is the Defensor. That gives them a 5+ invul save against ranged weapons.
Which you're already taking shields on your units and stuff. And
Right. Which I was like, they kind of already have that, assuming they're battle for it. So that one's kind of a nothing. I expect that one will get changed. So as Justin said, the Vexilla Magnifica is you have to subtract 1 from hit rolls in the shooting phase that target
hate it.
custodians
Oh,
within
so
6
much.
inches.
My God.
I hate it.
Holy jeez.
Whenever I play against Robert, I'm like, I got to kill that guy first. I try, but he's always like surrounded by dudes.
You've
gonna be
already
bubble
got an
wrap.
uphill battle wounding these guys. Now they're harder to even hit.
Right.
This is like,
and I go back to the Zinchian demon player and me goes like, and y'all lost your mind over the changeling making my stupid horrors hard to hit.
And I definitely
Come on.
I for sure think that when this book gets redone, like it'll only affect core units, because why is that banner making my Caladius Grav tanks neg 1 to hit and my Telemon Dread?
I think so. I think so too.
The funny thing to me is that it specifically calls out on the one that gives the 5+ invul that it has to be wholly within 9 inches, but this one is just units within 6 inches.
yeah.
And I was like, so it's easier and it's better? Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Sure. Why not?
It's a no-brainer.
But it's,
Unfortunately.
So the only downside to this is, I mean, it's a 6 power level for 1. You're getting 1 banner, but you're going to take
You're
it.
going to take it.
Yeah. It's just
Because back to this army being super elite, like every custodian you lose, you're going to feel it.
That's what I was saying.
This guy just
Yeah.
helps them survive so much better. Because
That's interesting because it's kind of an unassuming model in a way, right?
Yeah,
It's just like, hey, look, he's got a
cool little shield
Imperial
banner.
Aquila on his banner. Okay, cool.
And it really helps with, if you're not going first, especially because you plant that guy in the middle of your lines and he's literally making your entire army, because you're just branching out from him and keeping a toe in to that 6 inch.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everything is neg 1 to hit. And then it's just unleash the lions and it all just comes at you. And you can
I
still,
do hear the PTSD in your voice.
I'm telling you. But I've kicked these guys' butts many a time, so it feels
you go.
good. And I've gotten my butt kicked many times, so it all works
There
out.
you go.
Yeah. So that was mine, was the force multiplier within the army that is force multiplied.
Yeah.
So look, speaking of kicking butt and getting butts kicked, this army in competition, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't feel kind of qualified to really talk about this at the moment. We were looking around for maybe somebody who was playing it competitively. I couldn't really find anybody.
Yeah, crickets.
Yeah. But here's the thing too. And I think amongst us, we were talking that this is an army that's in a little bit of flux at the moment. The new Forge World Compendium just came out, so that's great. I think that's going to add a lot to them.
Oh, 9th edition has, absolutely.
9th edition Codex is going to come out and change the game.
But just fundamentally, like,
at its core rule.
what you were seeing with Custodes is that they would be like a tool put in the tool belt and help your Imperial army, right? So
you were saying in the Soup era.
in the Soup era, you were always seeing the 3 Caladius Grav tanks, right, for the backfield, nonsensical fire support for the points, and then the Dawn Eagle jet bikes up front, right?
Right.
With maybe Valdor or one of the characters, right? And then you would have to have your loyal 32 Imperial Guardsmen, right? Because they were low command point. You could only it was hard to get a battalion even of custodians. But now with 9th edition, where all the armies are starting with 12, now they don't have to you can do a whole custodian army and still get your 12 command points. Right. So you don't have to buy all these grunts that, they kind of help because you have more boots on the ground, but it just allows you to do so much more with them. And the compendium that was huge because they had so many points drops across the board. Talking with Robert, he's like, my unit choices like doubled because there were so many units that you just weren't seeing because they were so expensive in terms of points. And now it's been corrected. So I'm looking forward to seeing what hardcore Custodes players kind of come up with.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been opened up quite a bit.
Especially once their new codex comes out.
Especially then,
because there's going to be some changes. There has to be some changes.
Yeah, I think the field badsies with that with the Vexilla, I think that'll be good to see. And just the way I love what Games Workshop is doing with the core rule and rerolls. So the field badsies can be big when you're just like, why are we even rolling dice when you're hitting on 2s and rerolling 1s? And then rerolling 1s to, you know what I mean? It's just like such a huge change. It'll be cool to see. I think they're still going to be terrifying. But I think the points drops of the compendium is really going to be cool to see.
Like you said, it'll be nice to see some more variety of units. I know that, it's quite a while back now in competitive play timelines, but when I was in Boise, there were 2 Custodes armies, and it's exactly what you said.
Identical.
They were identical armies. It was, here's 3 of the grav tanks, here's a bunch of the jet bikes.
Yep.
I don't even remember seeing troops in the army. They must have had them, but I don't remember even seeing them. It just was a non-issue.
9th edition.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see what this looks like in the new evolution.
Yeah. So I would say if you're looking to get into this for competitive reasons at this point, you might want to hold on for just a little bit and see what happens. But that's probably where you sit at the moment.
You figure if you're gonna do a custodian army, you're gonna need some core troops. So
you can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong.
You can't go wrong with them. So all right. So Black Library has an extensive amount of writing about Adeptus Custodes, all through the Horus Heresy series, which has basically come to an end, and now the Siege of Terra series has begun, which is going to be 8 core books. Let's say that they've added a few additional books to it, but those are not necessarily necessary reading for that series. It is still going to remain those 8 kind of core final books on the Siege of Terra. You have the Adeptus Custodes mentioned pretty much throughout the Horus Heresy series. There are places where they are present. They are in kind of a third-person perspective, but where they really kick off was Master of Mankind, where you get to kind of see some of the inner workings of the Custodes, how they relate to the Emperor, and how they become, as we were talking about, like a sounding board and like almost companions to the Emperor, who's probably very much alone most of the time. And you see them as a fighting force in that book too. That
and you see how just
incredible,
insane they are. Like the one guy fighting with half his head gone.
Yeah,
the
damage they can take and keep fighting is just nuts. So, highly recommend if you haven't read the Horus Heresy series, reading it. You've got 50 something books that you can read of it. But Master of Mankind in particular, if you're interested in Custodes. In addition to that, as we talked about, 1,000 Suns and Prospero Burns, you do see Custodes within that, as well as them interacting with Marines, interacting with the Emperor a little bit. More so in kind of like almost like flashback pieces there. But then Chris Raitt has the Watcher of the Throne series, of which there are, I think, 2 books out currently that follow specifically a Custodes in there. So totally worth. And then I haven't read this book, and I knew it came out, and I want to read it, which is Valdor, Birth of the Imperium. Which of course talks about Constantine Valdor and
that guy's been around a while,
just a little bit. So there is just a plethora of Black Library material around the Adeptus Custodes that is worth taking, or Legio Custodes, depending upon when you're reading about it, that is worth reading. From a supporting supplement perspective, you have the War of the Spider, which is the Psychic Awakening.
Loving.
Yeah, I think everybody did. Every army got
some
nice
more than
little
others,
touch.
but yeah, that book.
Well, of course,
for custodians, and then for the Death Guard, that was a really, really powerful supplement for them.
Mm-hmm. The Thousand Sons got a nice kick in their Psychic Awakening. Like everybody got a bit of love there, and the thing I kept saying in the forum that I was in, because of course we were part of the Psychic Awakening.
Yeah, that was one of the last ones we did. Huh?
That was one of the last ones we
Golly,
did.
that's right.
Was they kept saying, "Oh, how come we didn't get a new model or a new something?" And I'm like, you are going to get rules that let you change the flavor of your army with the models you have, and you may want to add additional models as a result. Right.
You might.
And then it came out, and everybody stopped complaining and was like, "Oh, this is so great, and this is so great." And then I linked to the old post where the people were all complaining before it had ever come out. It was just like the little teaser. Right. And I was like, "Hey, remember this where you guys were all complaining about that? That was funny, huh?"
Yeah, right. And that's an interesting point you bring up, because I think a lot of people are always like, "I need the new shiny. Where's my new model?" And when Games Workshop can come out with these supplement books, even though people complain like, "Oh, I got to get another book and lug it around,"
they're going to complain about everything.
It really just simply changing rules and updating things can shine fresh light on units you've probably had in your garage forever. Like, look at me and my Defiler. Like, when the hell was I ever using a Defiler? Now I made a brand. It's like. It's cool. Yeah.
So War of the Spider was awesome. You now have the Imperial Armor Compendium, which is just fantastic.
That book
which is obviously going to update and replace the old Imperial Armor indexes that came out, which long overdue.
Yeah.
It's so cool to see all the Forge World units, falling under the Games Workshop rules development. Let the Forge World guys make the really sweet looking models, and let the guys that are trying to
focus on Horus Heresy.
And Horus Heresy, and let the Games Workshop rules developers that are doing a phenomenal job just focus on that. It was really cool to see.
Yeah. I think it makes a lot more sense that you have the Forge World people writing the rules for the Forge World version of the game. The guys who are entrenched in the 40K writing these rules. It just, as you think about it, like conceptually, that makes a lot more sense.
You're still going to have winners and quote unquote losers in the book.
You do in every codex.
You do in every codex, but for the most part, it was such a beautiful update. And to see units not go from like either auto takes or why would I ever take that, and all be somewhere in the middle is really cool.
I think it's also going to open up things for tournament organizers and tournament players who are going to feel like these got put through the paces just like everything else did.
Right.
No Forge World feels badsies.
Yeah. So, and we've definitely seen eras where Forge World's been great and then not so great and great again. And now I think it's sitting in the right group.
Yeah, for sure.
For it. Speaking of Forge World and Forge World support, Horus Heresy Book 7, as I just talked about, Inferno for 30K Gaming. If you're into 30K gaming, that's the book you need and want for your Legio Custodes.
Nice.
There's a massive model range from Forge World that I almost feel like is the other half of the model range for this army. Like Games Workshop has put out a bunch, but like that Talons of the Emperor box set they put out came with the cheapo plastic dreadnought, Contemptor Dread, and a Land Raider.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, but Land Raider's been around a while. And then you look over the Forge World side and you're like, oh, sure, there's a Land Raider here, but look at that.
Look at that thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that one's a little more expensive, but you know,
it flies.
but it flies for $450.
Yeah.
How much does it cost to make it fly?
The drop ship.
Have you seen that thing?
I have to look at its stats to see if it's worth $450 for me. I don't think so. I don't think I want that in that large of a group.
That's a long-term goal, right?
It's not even a goal at this point. But the point is, like, it's with such an elite small model range, I think that Forge World, and especially with this book, is going to make that way more appealing.
Sure.
To reach into and pull into your army and fun.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean the Caladius. Sure.
The Grav Tank.
The Grav Tank. There's a Palace Grav Tank. There's the Aquilon Terminators. There's the Orion Assault Dropship. That's the expensive one. And then transfer sheets for these things. Those transfer sheets are so good. I cannot even. When I watched Colin put that on, like, it changed the way I looked at that.
They're
model.
phenomenal.
They are absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. So take a look at Forge World's site. There's a ton of stuff that's currently out of stock.
Look at all the cool stuff.
It's
Do they have a little
it's
set a reminder,
that's-
like notify me when it's
yes, there
ring,
is.
ring the
Isn't that
bell?
convenient.
How
I kind of
convenient.
feel like it's like my a governor on my throttle.
Well, I mean, on a serious note, that's just a real thing that's happening right now. Like Games Workshop, just with the pandemic and
Oh, yeah.
supply chains and everything, it's just tough to see. Especially I feel bad for the independent retailers and stuff. That
For
are,
sure.
Talking to some of these guys, and they're just getting one of a new release.
Like Sky,
and
right? Yeah, Sky's struggling
Sky
under a
and
few
Seth.
things.
It's tough.
Yep.
But everybody just be patient. Things will return to normal. Hopefully, someday.
Maybe there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Who knows? So why is this army fun? What makes it unique, and why would you want to play it? Let's start with Justin.
For me, I would say first and foremost, the miniatures are absolutely stellar, pretty much across the board. There's
Yeah.
very few of their models that I'm like, yeah, I don't want to paint that. Like the models are absolutely fantastic. And I think that it offers a very kind of elitist way to play, clearly, because you don't have many models. So tactically, I could see it being fun and challenging because the army is kind of easy but difficult to use at the same time, right? Like everything in your army does exceptional at what it does, but you just don't have that many pieces to move around.
Right.
So every move you make has to be really well thought out.
It has to be the right move.
Has to be the right move. You really can't afford to lose units with this army. You
Yeah.
don't have the loyal
a good
32
point.
anymore. You have to really think ahead. And as tough as these guys are, man, they don't like smite and they don't like high-powered weapons and stuff like that. They are not unkillable like the lore will tell you they are. So a very cerebral army. Models are fantastic, and I think the models are fantastic whether you're a newer painter or a more experienced painter. Because you have so few models to paint, if you are a new player, you could get this army, spray that thing Liberator Gold, wash it with some Agrax Earthshade or whatever they call it nowadays, pick out your robes and your weapons, and you're basically done. Right?
Yeah.
Or if you want to take the more advanced road, you could do the whole NMM on the entire army and just go insane.
I have seen people start that, and I'm like, I don't know how you would do a whole army in that direction.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful.
And the whole, I love when people do like the candy apple effects, like on the Caladius Grav tanks,
It's so good.
You could do the marbling effect where people take the dryer sheets and spread it out. I mean, it's just because you have so few models. Either way, I almost look at it like, I could maybe paint an army of these guys in
no time,
in like a few months. Just a great looking army, and it's very brutal on the tabletop if used correctly.
Yeah.
I've been on the receiving end of this army several times, and it can really kick you in the teeth.
Awesome.
So,
What about you, Jay?
deceptive?
Yo, dog, I heard you like gold. So, as somebody who actually doesn't particularly love painting little gold filigree details on things, it's not my favorite version of detail to pick out.
Sure.
This is, as Justin said, like from a hobby point of view, there's a lot you can do here, and there's a ton of room to learn. I think was a kind of a point, that I was hearing Justin make as well. Is so you could spray them and just hit them with a wash and get them good, but then the ability with gold to start playing with color theory a little bit and working in some purples and some greens like you've been doing with your Black Legion. And I think that's one of those areas that doing those sort of things about putting a little bit of green or a little bit of purple or a little bit of whatever it is into that gold, it isn't as scary as like it used to be. People talk about painting blue on flesh tones. And then we saw all these people trying it with these just, it doesn't look human at all. And why is there a big blue blob under this guy's cheek? And And there was a level of expertise demanded of brush control and things like that to understand why that works. This doesn't have that. When you're painting an entirely gold model, there's a lot of room for learning in there and doing that. So from a hobby standpoint, I think not only is it accessible, but it's also a nice like bridge between I'm just learning some things and I want to up my game. There's a very comfortable transition zone in there. And the second thing is I agree 100% that this is a chess-like army as any hyper elite army is, but there's not a ton of mental overhead with this army.
Right.
Which is really, really nice. Like the stratagems that Justin was mentioning are all awesome, but it's clear that they're awesome. There isn't a ton to be like, gosh, I wonder how synergies in this army aren't really, I won't say they're not a thing.
They're not complex.
No, it's
Banner and character within 6. Okay, cool, got it.
yeah, like because
That's exactly his point.
at the end of the day, they're stat monsters. Like you're dealing with a stat line that's exceptional, a weapon stat line, a character stat line, And the ability of the aura is like, no, that's very clear.
Yeah.
So it's this great design space. Like if you're talking about game design, there's this great mental space of these are very, very simple decisions.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of variables around them. But I'm not gearing with the how does the thing work? I'm gearing with how do I use it?
Right.
And I think this army is really cool in the sense of you get to really focus on how to use it, not how do I make it work.
Right. That's an interesting distinction.
It's a giant neon sign of how it's a giant gold. It's a giant gold sign of how do you make it work. It kicks you in the teeth and it blows your face off. There's just not very many of them.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so it's very clear how to use it. You just got to get good at using the tool, but the tool's not something that's difficult to figure out.
Right.
This isn't an abacus.
Right.
You know, this is,
Yeah, totally. And we always talk about like, does the army match the lore? You know, I would say like 1000%, like, yes, like having played against this army several times, like it feels very much like the lore,
which is what leads me into my point.
Yeah.
Is literally the lore around this army.
Nice.
And the theme of it. And that you have options in what you want to do with that theme and how you want to play it out. I think when done nicely it'll look great on the table. I think it's actually going to be fairly easy to make it look fairly good on the table.
Yeah.
So you have it out there. I think I love the concept of the lore, as you were just saying, and the idea that these are the guys who could be around the Emperor. Here you are on the table. Like it steps it up even another level. But again, there's not a lot to wrap your head around. Like once you've got your rules down and memorized for your basic stat line for these guys, you're going to be pretty good.
I mean, they don't even have a psychic phase.
Yeah,
It's just gone.
They get
Don't have to think about it.
For me, that would be like a vacation in some way.
it's why I enjoyed playing my Corn Demon so much. I was like,
Whole phase of the game gone.
I would go movement, psychic's a crutch, on to combat.
Yeah, they still do have some
Psychic's a crutch.
a crutch. They still do have some inbuilt psychic defenses, which is cool.
Yeah.
Right. But again, like that goes back to the thing of like, A, lore, they should, and
Yeah.
B, well, I don't have to figure out when's the right time to use my psychic defense. I'm going to smite all your dudes. No. Hey, look, I figured it out.
I've got it. So yeah, I think lore wise, that is probably what kicked me off into getting the army. It was the lore, and it was the stories in the codexes that I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I could do this. And look, it's, I'll buy some of these used, and then I'll supplement that with some that I buy in boxes. And then, oh yeah, Forge World sold out. Okay.
Yeah.
Phew.
Yep.
I would say also, as you know by now, if you've listened to the show, I've always been a huge Forge World fanboy. So this opens the door for me to add some cool Forge World stuff to an army that I can play in 40K that now, quite frankly, people are going to look at and go, yes, it's tough. It's been through its paces. It's gone through play testing. Have fun. Right. And I think that's always been a little bit, that's what's held me back with this. Also, I know that people kind of tend to get, as Justin would say, the feel badsies when playing against this army. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. But like I said, at Nova Open, when we went to Nova Open, right? I was in the narrative event, and the way that would work is you would have a captain for your team and your 4 players or 5 players or whatever, and then you would face off against another team for a round, and you'd be like, okay, our guy who's playing this is going to play against this group. The captain would say, okay, the guy you're going to play against this guy, you're going to play against that guy, you're going to play against that guy. We're trying to eke out these wins. And so I remember the first thing we walked up, there were 2 Telamon dreadnoughts. There was like the Custodes army getting unpacked, and we're playing against this team. And the captain of our team's like, so who wants to play against the Adeptus Custodes? Everybody's like, and I'm like, okay, I'll play him. And I was playing Tzeentch Demons. And I was like, yeah, I'll play. What the heck? The guy seemed nice. Cool. No problem. Let's play. And he made some mistakes. And he had those Telamon dreadnoughts, which I was deathly afraid of.
Yeah, 2 of them?
Yes. And he had guys on bikes and all this stuff. And I was just able to outmaneuver him. He should have pressed forward with those Telamons because I was able to get out of view of them. And it was just like halfway through the game, I'm like, I've got this. And I got it because he didn't press his advantage. He should have mopped the floor with me, but invuln saves are invuln saves.
Yeah.
And when you don't even have to make saves because you can get out of the way of some of that stuff, it's not a problem.
For sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is an army that's beatable. I think it's fun. It was fun to play in that game. Yes, I won that particular game I played, but I recognize that I won because he made mistakes.
Sure.
And sometimes that's okay. Right.
That might be the best endorsement of this army is when they make hyper elite armies, they being GW, often it falls into one of two camps of like, it's an incredibly difficult to use army because it's so limited and it's hard to use.
Yeah.
Or it's so good that it's not really competitive. It just stomps, especially in casual play.
Yeah.
And I've never heard that of this army, that it falls into either group, that it's like, no, it's really, really hard. That as a unit, they are tough.
I never heard anybody say like they did with knights. Well, I won't play that army.
Right. It's like, no, their dudes are nasty, but you can beat them.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where it should be, right? That's where every army should be, is like, well, that's really nasty, but you can handle it.
It's 41st millennium. It's all nasty.
Yeah. You know, so, and I maybe that's for a hyper elite army that's like, no, it still feels fun and balanced to play with.
Yeah.
And against.
Yeah.
You know, that's about as good as it gets.
And you definitely, objective game is where it's at with this army. If you're looking to do them, I know Robert has always allied in, almost every time I've played him, he's always allied in an assassin, for example, as just like a cheap, good unit to buff his custodes, but also to capture an objective. You know, so just think about objectives when you're building this army.
Or deny your psychers,
or both. You know, just think about the objective for sure.
That guy. All right. Well, on that note, let's take a break. We'll come back and we will close out the show. So that's it for episode 212 of the Independent Characters. It had been a while.
Felt good.
It did feel good. I like how we just flow right back into it.
Yeah.
Right. It was like, that's one of the things I like about how we record the show. Like when we start off with just the general hobby progress and all that, like it helps us kind of get into the
battle
flow of
the
show.
ring rust.
Okay, now we're going to actually talk about the topic, but we can kind of meander around a little bit.
Totally.
I was a little nervous. I won't even lie.
Really?
Well, it's been a long time since I was on the show.
It's a practice.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of kept up on it, but no, it was fun to be ready. It was the like, man, I haven't done one of these in a while.
And we also started off with one that was like, first off, not in your wheelhouse.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Show of Force are pretty stressful for me, but not as stressful as Horus Heresy cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck
Which
with those.
I'm 2 books behind on that. I'm like, that's not happening anytime soon. Sorry, guys. It's just like I don't have the energy or time right now to put into that.
Yeah.
So
If only one of our hosts was retired.
Yeah.
One of the co-hosts was retired.
Yeah.
You might have time.
and could get out here safely.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good.
All right. So listen, absolutely appreciate everybody coming back and listening to the show. As you heard at the beginning of the show, we know we're off on our timeline a little bit. We are trying to get caught up. We'll see how things go. Bear with us. Show's not going anywhere. We're not in any trouble or anything. It's really just a matter of finding consistent schedules that we can all adhere to at this point. It's been
so
been
much
a tough
real
time.
life. So much.
Once
real life.
Astronomicon is back in place, I'm going to feel like, you talk about clearing the mechanism. And one thing, to go off on a soapbox thing a little bit here, is for people who deal with depression, and I am typically not one of those people. I have had times where I,
Sure.
Forge World being sold out.
That was the worst.
Yeah.
It was a low moment.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I have had a time where I was
you're a
in
human
a
being.
deep hole. I'm a human being. But one of the things that helps people who are depressed or anxious or those things is cleaning your area, clearing the mechanism when you're painting, that kind of thing. So when my house is cluttered like it is right now as a result of the damage that was done and the lack of the storage stuff and all this, I get anxious about it. And
Can relate.
one of the things that settles me is clearing everything and getting everything in a place where it's supposed to be. And I can't do that right now. And so that kind of causes me a bit of like, all right, if I could just get this done, then I can. But at least we're making progress towards that. As we said, the outside's fixed. The power is back, thank God. And things are making good progress. So hopefully I'm back in action soon.
Sanity is returning.
Slowly but surely. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know why I had to bring that
The
up.
rift is waning.
Yeah, for sure. So if you like what you heard, leave us a review on iTunes.
Please.
I think the last review was like, they should come out with one more than every blue moon or something like that. I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, check this out.
We have our Facebook group, which is super supportive. If you have friends that you want to have join that Facebook group, please do not just invite them through the Facebook group because they don't get fed the questions. And the questions are a requirement to get into the group. If we see that they are not answered, we just automatically decline the invite.
That's so weird that it doesn't do that.
Yeah, it's kind of silly. So anyway, it's there though. It's a great group. We talked about the Patreon before, but I'm not really pushing that right now until we get our act back together.
Yeah.
So that should be soon. But you guys got anything you want to add before moving on?
It's good to be back at it, man.
It's good to be back at it, and I am playing a game of 40K this weekend.
Oh, man.
I got the I always get the juices pumping after these shows.
For sure. So, well then, this is Carl.
This is Jody.
And this is Justin.
And we're coming to you from the broken Astronomicon, but the light is flickering back on where repairs are underway. And?
You just stole mine.
I had mine tightened.
No, you.
Oh, I did. Awesome.
So what's yours, Jody?
What's yours, Jody?
Carl stole mine.
I didn't even read yours.
I could see. I like.
Yeah, I thought he was doing 2 at first as well. So it's his show. It's all good. But those
What
lights
about you, Justin? What are your last words?
In auramite clad and retroputer gold sprayed.
You stole mine.
That's funny.
This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.